Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, and we are in the Freeport High School cafeteria. We will get started. I don't believe Susanna will be joining us this evening, and we don't have a student rep just yet. I hear the big elections are happening this week, so hopefully our next board meeting we will have one of our two student representatives with us. But in the meantime, we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. So, do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the September 27th, 2023 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Kara and Maddie, thank you. All those in favor? Great, none opposed. Adjustments to the agenda?
I do have a couple this evening. Under item 8, reports from the superintendent. Items for information 1, I have another resignation to announce, and I'd like to add item 2 to that. I have a retirement to announce. I would also like to add a letter B. Would like to have Mr. Pidden inform the board about the guidance position at DCS and some thoughts he has, and we will, as a result, add an item under 13 new business. It will be a letter B. Consideration to employ a PE teacher instead of a guidance counselor at Durham for the remainder of the school year. But he will discuss that under the superintendent's report. And that's it.
Okay, wonderful. So we don't have our student rep here, but we do have Jen. So occasionally she wants to fill in, and she's coming up. Yes.
Well, Jen's coming up. Wow, very quiet tonight. A community member has said they can't see us on YouTube, so I don't know if we could double check.
Okay. You can see it on your computer. Okay. Maybe it was just a timing. Yeah. All right.
Great.
Jen.
Thanks for having me. Jen Gulko, principal of the high school. I just realized this is my 9th year speaking to the board, and my first year I have to use the readers. Cannot see my own notes. So
Will's laughing at you from over there.
It's okay. Will's laughing at me a lot. It's okay. So I'm going to give some quick updates since we don't have a board rep. As Michelle said, we have our elections coming this week. So I'll give a couple of quick updates, but then also wanted to do some more programmatic and year-long updates of some things that we have happening at the high school this year. So for some of our recent updates, our sports season's in full swing. We've had some great wins and some tough losses, which are all learning experiences for our student athletes. We are incredibly proud of our golf team. They are the Class B state championship runner-ups. And senior Eli Spalding, who's come and visited the board before, he won for his 3rd time as a Class B individual champ. So he is certainly somebody to watch in college. Our drama program is gearing up for the fall musical of the Addams Family in November. This includes our students who are in our production design class, which happens during the day. They are the ones who help to build the set. So there's lots of excitement around this show across the school. We had over 50 students and staff participate in the Out of the Darkness Walk for suicide awareness and prevention on September 23rd. And Team Theo, which was created in honor of Theo Ferreira, our student who died by suicide last year, raised over $26,000 for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. The team that was right behind ours was around like $4,000 or $5,000. So it was just an outstanding effort by everybody who was there and a very powerful day. I wanted to talk a little bit more about school in general. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up is something that has been addressed in the last few board meetings, which is talking about the bathrooms at the high school. So this has come up in the past, and I just wanted to give a few updates. So just for informational purposes, During a typical day, we have 3 sets of multi-stall bathrooms that are open, and we do only have 3 single-stall bathrooms across the school. One of the things that Michelle had shared at the last meeting that we have done this year is that we included vacant and occupied signs. Those are the new locks that are on the bathrooms that are by the library. And the teachers and staff who work around there have seen a significant improvement because students know if the door is locked, then someone's in there. So it's definitely not a lot of single stall bathrooms, but it is something that the addition of the locks has certainly made a difference there. The other thing that I wanted to comment on is that, and I've said this to the board in the past, the only time that we lock a bathroom at the high school is if there's been vandalism or there's a smell that we can't get rid of very quickly, such as marijuana, which unfortunately happens from time to time. We have never locked the single stall bathrooms this year. The only time that they're locked is when they're in use, and they are frequently in use. And we do not, our number one concern right now, for sure, in terms of substance use is vaping policies and consequences across the school. So we're trying to battle this. There are students who are vaping in our bathrooms, and we are trying to handle it, both with, as I said, providing them support and also trying to be really clear about those expectations and consequences. We implemented last year limits on the number of people who can go into the multi-stall bathrooms at the same time, and that has made a massive difference. So no longer are you opening the door to the bathroom and there's like a crowd of kids who are standing there. They're not allowed to do that. We have enough people that can go into all of the stalls, plus a few people waiting, and then other people wait outside the bathroom. And the vast majority of the bathrooms during the school class periods are empty. But it's obviously when 640 kids are passing through the hallways, then they tend to get busy in between the classrooms. So, in between the class periods. So we're checking bathrooms frequently. We are, I had a fun time this summer wallpapering the bathrooms with information about vaping, just how to get support, all the different information about what chemicals are in there. And those are the things that we're really trying to combat. But hopefully this clarifies some of the points that have come up. We are always concerned about safety and comfort. We addressed this with all 4 classes at their opening assemblies, talking about respect and talking about comfort and also being clear about the expectations and the consequences. So we'll continue to monitor that and hope that we can make sure that people are feeling comfortable and feeling safe. So shifting gears again a little bit, a central focus for us this year, again, will be student mental health. It continues to be something that we are constantly working on and focused on. As I've shared with the board, we entered into the 3-year partnership with the Jed Foundation, and their first site visit is coming up on October 26th. So their team comes here for a whole day. They share the data reports from the surveys that they gave to all students and all staff last year, and then we analyze the data with them, and then they come up with help us come up with a strategic plan to think about what we are already offering for mental health support, and where the gaps are, and where are some things that where we need to take action. We're also really excited about a new local partnership with the organization Valo. And this year, a couple of weeks ago, some of you may know that we took our 9th and 10th graders for our trips to El Albin for outdoor discovery. And at first, we thought it was unfortunate, and then it ended up being serendipitous that they could only take 2 grade levels, and they could only take us for half of a day. And so we decided to focus on the 9th and 10th graders because we have a trip planned for 11th and 12th later in the winter. And then, and thinking about the other half of the day, that's where the partnership with Valo came about. And Valo agreed to partner with us to do some social emotional learning and programming for the students. And tonight I asked Dana Anderson, who is the executive director of Valo and also a proud former FHS teacher, to come and speak and talk about our work in September and our partnership for the year.
Thanks, Jen. Can everyone hear me? I don't use a mic very often, so let me just raise your hand if you can't
Yeah, you
hear.
probably need to get a little closer.
Okay, how's that?
Sorry. Yeah, that's
Okay.
better. Thank you.
Go back to my karaoke days,
Yep.
right? Really grateful to be here, and it's when I was doing the work a couple weeks ago with the 9th and 10th graders, it just felt like coming home. So I taught here for 15 years before I founded Volo, and feel really grateful to be back with these students and the staff. So I just want to talk a little bit about what our organization is, and then I'll get into the work we've done at Freeport High School so far and the work we're doing this year and hoping to do into the future. So I'll start by saying that Volo is because it's the $1 million question. What does it mean? It's the Finnish word for light. When I founded the organization, I didn't want to call the organization light, but I wanted that idea. And the notion, like multiple meanings behind why we chose it, the idea of reflection and the importance of reflection in our lives, and in this day and age especially feels poignant and relevant, the idea of lightness and hope. So our mission is to cultivate the emotional well-being of young people, adolescents specifically aged 14 to 24, and we do it through group conversations and in an unplugged atmosphere, small groups where at the core of it is peer-to-peer engagement with each other. In the decade I've been doing this work, it has never felt so poignant or so relevant. I want to just back up a bit, or maybe go up a bit, 30,000 feet, and talk about the climate of our country, especially following the pandemic. And as many of you probably are aware, the Surgeon General, Murthy, issued what probably will become a landmark advisory on social media. This was in May. I'm going to quote him. He said, "The current body of evidence indicates that while social media may have benefits for some children and adolescents, there are ample indicators that social media can also have a profound risk of harm to the mental health and well-being of our children and adolescents." And he basically has described this mental health crisis as the defining health issue of our time. That is Volo's call to action. That is this affirmation that the work we've been doing for 10 years is finally being seen by society as important as sports and academics in a school setting, and obviously in a home setting as important in as having a square meal on the table or a bed to lie in. That when that came out, I think it was kind of surprising for all of us who maybe are watching ourselves and our children on social media and thinking, oh, it's pretty bad. But for the Surgeon General to make this statement was, I think, really important for our nation. Coming closer to Maine, pretty sad statistic, but one that fuels us in terms of our work, is that in the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, which was last given in 2021, nearly 36% of Maine students said they felt sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks, which was an increase from 32% in 2019. So the combination of this being a national recognized crisis and right here in Maine, us feeling it, is really honestly an inspiration for us to spread our wings and expand our work. So when Jen and Charlie called me to say, could you come here in 2 weeks and work with 300 9th and 10th graders? We said, heck yeah. We do much of our work in small groups on retreats with groups of 10 to 20 young people. So you can imagine working with 150 kids one day and 150 the next was a paradigm shift for us, but one we were honored, honestly, and grateful to lean into. You know, I said to Jen, this is going to be a different kind of work, and we'll do it if you promise it just becomes the foundation. And she wholeheartedly supported that idea of finding ways to continue the work that we start with these young people. So we feel really, really grateful that schools around us in southern Maine and hopefully beyond are recognizing not only the importance of social emotional well-being for our young people, but also the fact that, and I come to this from a slightly biased standpoint, that it's way too much for current school staff to be taking that on in addition to all of the other responsibilities that they have as teachers and guidance counselors and administrators. And so this is where it feels like our work as a partner can really dovetail with the work that they are doing every day, but we don't have enough time in the day to address all the ways we can help young people. So I want to go back to our time here with the 9th and 10th graders. We had a half of a day, or a couple of hours, I should say, with half of the 9th grade in the morning, and then they flip-flopped to beans, and we had the other half. So we were working in groups of 60 to 70 students. And while the circumstances are very different from being in a small circle over a 6-hour to weekend-long program, we felt so welcomed by this community. It wasn't a surprise, but it felt so good to be back. Students and staff, they were engaged. They asked really, really good questions. They showed empathy. Even if they didn't speak, I think something that's really important is it was a little bit of the air they were breathing for those 2 hours. And to me, what the air was recognizing our teachers and administrators think this is important because they're listening to not only the national and local statistics, but the things they're hearing in the hallways and the small gestures they're noticing that the kids are really challenged right now. And so for those students, even if they weren't actively participating, we trust that they recognize the signal this was sending, and it wasn't this gratuitous, let's just do this. I think they recognize that as a district and as a school specifically, the adults recognize the importance of them. And I think, I'll say that we've got a lot of metaphor. I think as a former English teacher, I can't help but bring some metaphors to my organization. And one of my favorites connected to light is the notion of embers. And what I believe, and we believe in our organization, is that every human being, and specifically adolescents, have embers within their being. And that work that we do at Valo is literally just fanning those embers. So they have this capacity, and sometimes they just need a space or someone to listen so that they can bring out what they're challenged by, or they can bring out a question for a peer that they want to ask, but they just need permission to dare to ask their friend how they're doing. So in that day that we had with them, I feel like what we started this foundation, we maybe were fanning a little bit of the embers. Jen, actually, I was lucky enough to have her in one of my 4 groups, and she and I witnessed a group that, in a matter of moments were opening up to each other. And this is with, we're practically counting off. It's advisories, and so they're not with all of their best friends. And what she and I witnessed is, I think, just the seed of what something beautiful that can grow here in terms of kids being able to open up with each other and trust each other and the adult in the room. And that really is what our organization is founded on. And when you look at all of the research from coming out of COVID, of all of the isolation and the needing to feel a sense of belonging and that you matter, especially we're seeing with the current 7th through really sophomores in high school, those 2 years of development that they missed, that socialization they missed by being secluded essentially for over a year. We've said this to the young people, you have it in you just haven't had enough practice, like many people who didn't go through a pandemic. And so we're just helping them along in that way. So we trust that they know the adults were listening, and that we have created spaces for peer-to-peer and peer-to-adult real connection. One of the things we talk about after an exercise we do is that it's so common in a hallway or on a sidewalk to say, you say, how are you? And the other person says, good, or well, how are you? Good. And that what we say at Valo is we're saying, no, but really, how are you? And helping them learn to ask that question. So moving forward, we're meeting in a couple of weeks with the Freeport High School staff to give, so some of the staff were able, who were 9th and 10th grade teachers, were able to be there with us, but over half the staff wasn't. So we're going to present at a faculty meeting, give them a little glimpse of an experience of what we did with the young people so they have a sense of that. And then our hope is that through this beautiful advisory program that is built into the schedule, wasn't here when I was here in quite this way, so I applaud Jen and the work that the staff has done to build that in, that the hope is that 9th and 10th grade all the advisories have leaders. And so Valo's going to come in and work with those leaders to talk to them, revisit these check-ins that we taught them how to do a couple of weeks ago, and see about them, how they feel. Hopefully they feel good. I think they will. That they would then lead with their advisor check-ins in their advisory once a month. And we would be there as to coach them on the side. But it's not rocket science, and I think they just need the confidence to know that they can do this. And we have certainly put structures into place so they understand if something comes up in a check-in that's too heavy for them, there will be an adult in the room and there will be places to go. So we're really hoping that we're building these skills that we started working with them a couple weeks ago. I don't like to talk this much. My Valo youth will say I don't talk this much, I swear. But I wanted to end with an anecdote and a couple of quotes. We were lucky enough in August to work with Bob Strong and the varsity boys soccer team. And that was like our ideal. So it was 22 young people, Bob, 4 Valo guides on an overnight retreat. And he chose this instead of whitewater rafting. And I think that right there is a testament not only to him as a coach, but the values and culture of this school. It was, I had goosebumps just going in there. And so the story is that last week we check in with Bob periodically. We've come in, talked with the players since to see how, because they're doing these weekly check-ins, or somewhat weekly. And so I texted Bob and said, how's it going? Can we come in and talk? Do you guys need anything? Do you need support? And he said, no, I'll just share a text with you. And he had texted the boys and said, I think this afternoon, maybe it was raining, we're going to watch the video from last night's game and do some yoga or stretches. How's that sound? And one of the boys immediately texted back and said, can we also do a Valo check-in? So my vision of this work is that becomes the language of the school, that kids recognize the importance and the tools they have within them to ask for what they need. And sometimes it's a check-in, and it might be for themselves and or what we saw in the soccer players, and a bit with the 9th and 10th graders is to be there for each other. So I'll end with the soccer players' quotes. We do a anonymous survey at the end, and I just think their words can speak much more than I can. One of them said, after this retreat, I definitely feel like I got many things off my chest that I've been wanting to say for a while, which really helped my well-being. Another said, I feel even more connected to my team, especially the younger players or the newer guys on the varsity team. And now I have a deeper understanding of what my teammates are going through off the field. And finally, I think the question must have been like, how are you feeling? And this young person said, very good, because I really expressed how I felt and related really well with my teammates. And I'm not the only one going through stress and anxiety. So I really appreciate, Jen knows this, I keep thanking her, the opportunity to work with these high school students, and anything we can do to support the emotional well-being culture of this school, we're all in. So thanks for the chance to share a bit.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks to Dana, and we're really incredibly grateful to Valo for their support and for diving in. And it really, I think, was more like a week ahead of time that I asked for them to come and shift their whole program and come with us. But we're really excited for this work too, and for what it means for students. So that's it for my updates. You'll hear more from me because it's my goals tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. All right. So we are up to public comments. We only have 3 folks. but I'm going to go through our quick public comment update because I'm not sure if everyone's heard it in the past. So in order to hear from different number of folks, 3 minutes per person, doesn't seem like that'll be an issue this evening. So, but for those who have not participated in our meetings before, just like to review a few rules ahead of time to ensure public comment process goes smoothly with no surprises. We ask for our speakers to identify themselves, their name and their town of residence. We ask you to be brief. We know discussions of school-related issues can get emotional, but please remember that our children are watching and we are neighbors, so please be civil. We will not permit profanity or shouting at one another or comments that disparage and attack individuals or groups of individuals. Speakers should direct all comments to the board. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to the opinions of the public that relate to school and education matters. It is not a public debate nor a conversation, so no questions should be directed to the board, and the board will not be responding to questions at this point. We're here to listen. The board will not permit complaints or allegations against staff members. These are personnel matters which the board is not permitted to hear in public. If there are complaints against staff, these can be handled appropriately through our complaint policy of KEB. And if you're interested in a two-way conversation on the board, on the RSU5 website, are individual emails and phone numbers for board members as well as the superintendent. So thank you for being patient as I went through the introduction. And Connie Clifford, you're up first.
Hi, my name is Connie Clifford, and I'm a resident of Freeport. And I'm here for two reasons tonight. The first is I'd like to read a joint statement of appreciation and support. We recognize the joint statement and appreciation of support is from the Tri-Town Equity and Inclusion Coalition and Freeport Forward. We recognize the effort of RSU5 School Board's Policy Committee to research, engage with staff, write, edit, and advocate for the drafted policy ACAAA, transgender and gender expansive students. We commend the board for considering the needs of all students in our district in voting to unanimously pass the policy through first read. We urge you to vote in favor of passing this document into adopted policy at the next school board meeting because we support transgender and gender expansive youth and value their safety, privacy, and autonomy. Thank you for all that you do to serve our school community. And secondly, I would just like to thank you from me personally. I was at the last school board meeting and I did not speak, and I regretted that. I regretted not speaking because there's so many voices in opposition of the policy, and I felt deep regret for not standing up and advocating for you to vote to pass that draft. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate all that you do. I would also like to thank our teachers and administrators and coaches and all the people who work for RSU5. I have two children. I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. And in the last meeting, it felt very accusatory in some ways towards some of our teaching and administrative community. And I just want to say thank you so much for all that you do for my children and the children of this community. I know that in my experience, I have never felt anything but the best intentions, the best teaching, and the best coaching for my kids and the kids that are in our friend group, our community, and on our sports teams. So I'm just here to say thank you, and thank you for all the good work that you're doing.
Thank you, Connie. Jennifer Curran.
Good evening. So the past couple times I've got up and I've just spoken about statistics, but I really haven't told you why.
Would you mind just name and town of residence?
You
Sorry.
got it. Jennifer Curran, Falmouth.
Thank you.
Why I'm here. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. And it's not easy to get in the car when my family is finishing dinner in Falmouth. And I trot up here to come to the school where my sister and brother-in-law live. Please keep in mind that being a gay woman, I realize that the majority of folks that create legislation or policies are typically heterosexual and cisgender, as well as the people that'll speak at this podium. Please also keep in mind that as a member of the LGBTQIA community, I've lived through years where mostly heterosexual cisgender leaders have created policies and legislation that has been harmful for the most part and recently hopeful. And so I gathered strength when older members or elder members, and I'm speaking of myself now, but then spoke for me. And that's why I get in the car to come to Freeport to talk to you all. Because I have lived through times when gay folks did not have rights at all, where I could have been fired, where I couldn't get married. I've been with my partner almost 25 years, but married only 10. And we married the night we were able in 2012 at 12:30 at night in Falmouth. And even then there was a protester outside the door and police presence. So I stand here not because I like doing this. I'm not a public speaker. I work as a therapist. I'm here because I've been part of a community where the homeless, gay people are 5 to 7% of your community. We are 40% of the homeless community. As a child, I was raised in a very conservative Christian household, and I knew early on that turning to my parents to come out was not going to end well. So I waited. I knew because I had gay cousins, and as they spoke of them, you can tell they were not going to be supportive of me. And so I waited until I was in my 20s. And when I came out, I was not allowed to come home again. This happens. This is real. Trans kids aren't scary. I'm not scary. I'm a mom. I'm in bed by 9:30 most nights, later when I come here. We're not scary people. We want to go to the bathroom and then get back to class. We want to go and play our sports and then get back to class. And anybody that says differently, the statistics do not support that. We're not showing genitals. It's not happening. And it's embarrassing and sad to have people stand up of my community and say so. It's not there. My brother and sister-in-law took me in, and they live here. And that's why I'll continue to be here. Thank you for what you do. I thought you might want some background. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jessica Conley.
Hi, I'm Jessica Conley from Durham. I believe we have presented you with ample evidence that this policy is unlawful, overreaching, and inappropriate. I know you hear the truth in our words because you're getting defensive, so much so that at least 2 of your board members actively behaved against what this school stands for at the last meeting. According to our superintendent, RSU 5 stands for respect and inclusivity of all who walk through our doors. We condemn hateful actions meant to demean others. The beliefs and viewpoints of roughly half of your district were vilified and demeaned last meeting to validate the stance of the board members who spoke in favor of this policy. First, our feelings and viewpoints were compared to the actions committed in World War II. So because we don't support your trans policy, we are just as bad as the Nazis. This is what traditional families are facing. If we don't actively agree with woke policies, we are vilified by those claiming to be accepting of all. The hypocrisy is so frustrating. Love for all except for conservative families. Let me be clear, we do not hate trans kids or the LGBTQ community. What this policy does to upset us is it infringes on our rights as parents to teach our children about the world when it is appropriate to do so. If you remember from my speech last time, ages and maturity and brain development do not correlate with the population of students you are introducing this to. They are not equipped to understand such an adult topic. And when we speak of dangers in the bathroom, we are not insinuating a trans child would be the one committing assaults of any and all kinds in the restrooms. What we are saying is that by allowing any gender into any bathroom, so long as they have given a self-declaration, they can go in. No one is policing the bathrooms to ask for such declarations or to enforce the privacy and protections for those inside. What this does is make a revolving door for anyone to walk in unquestioned, therefore increasing the risk of assault and decreasing the sense of privacy one has in a traditional bathroom. Now on to my next qualm from a different school board member, insinuating there are many families in RSU 5 that would not support their children because we disagree with this policy. That's low. We will support our children, though we don't have to do it in the way that you recommend. There's the beauty of freedom. Thank God we still have it. Now for my final point of the speech, keeping wording vague for the safety of the students leaves the door wide open for secret keeping from parents. Changing pronouns, transitioning, medications, and medical diagnoses behind closed doors. It may not be your intent for medication administration to be kept from parents, but that vague wording leaves room to do so, and you know it. We have already seen it happen in Fairfield to a 17-year-old just this year. And you know what happened when the father complained? The school sent CPS after him. This is the threat we, as parents who don't agree with this woke agenda, are being threatened with. So how can you possibly blame us for seeing these intentional gaps in wording as dangerous? These topics are where I take issue. I do believe the traditional families of this district should receive, at the very least, a public apology for defamation of character by school board members, insinuating we don't love and support our children, and that we are hateful to an entire group of people, likening us to the Nazis. We just want what every parent should want, safety and happiness for our kids. We just believe that goal can be reached by a different path than this policy presents. It is such a bummer because my girls love DCS, but I feel like the views of this district are being completely, the views of my portion of society are being completely disregarded and hated. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so we will move on to item 8, report from the superintendent.
Okay, item number 1, resignations. I'm announcing the resignation of Bethany Jensen, PES and MLS speech language pathologist, Teresa Alaka, DCS guidance counselor, and Rick Vachon Sr., FMS custodian. I also have another one not on our agenda, Lila Richards, Mass Landing School Ed Tech, and that's effective on October 6th. I have a retirement to announce this evening. Christy Johnson, who has been at Moore Street School for many, many years as a grade 2 teacher, has announced her official retirement effective November 1st, 2023. And those are all under the items for information. And now if I could have Mr. Pidden come to the podium. He's going to have a conversation about his thoughts about the guidance counselor position.
So Jen, when you're not sure which glasses to use, that's when you know you're in trouble, because these will be on and off, I think. So thank you, Ms. Will Pidden. I'm the principal at Durham Community School.
You're going to have to get a little closer or a little louder.
Okay. Which we could do with being a little nearer, but I'll get a little closer. Okay, hopefully that's a bit better.
It's a little bit better. You could even be a little bit louder. Got feedback from folks at home that they couldn't hear the board members and the speakers, so I'm just trying to head that off. Okay, Colin's going to come help you out.
I got it. How's that? Okay, and how's that? Dear Michelle. Oh, sorry, I forgot there was the rest of the group. Unfortunately, during the summer, a candidate we had nominated for our guidance role, and you may recall I came to you in the spring to explain the process we were looking to achieve, which was we had a half-time guidance along with our full-time guidance counselor. And one of the pieces, not dissimilar to the update that Jen had given you, was as we were looking at how do we respond to some of the feedback that we had got from the data from the Youth Health Survey also. And our plan had been to add in this additional half a guidance counselor, so we'd have 2 full-time counselors, one of whom would be really focusing on supporting our students in grades 5 through 8 and combining that counseling role with some sort of wellness roles to teach into some of the gaps that we were identifying. Unfortunately, during the summer, a candidate we had nominated removed herself at the last minute from the position, and we've been playing catch up ever since. So we had reposted at that point in the summer and then hired an experienced candidate the week before school started. And we're hopeful that that would have been a good solution. Unfortunately, this employee has now informed us that they are unable to fulfill their contract and in fact will be leaving this week. The reasons that these people made their decisions are unrelated. So as a result, we've been looking at ways to solve the challenge of ensuring that the students in grades 5 through 8 will still get the wellness curriculum that we've anticipated and planned for them. The proposal that I've come to ask for your consideration with is to shift the hiring from a guidance position for this year into a temporary hiring of a physical education teacher through the end of this school year. It would be a 1-year only position. The intent being that we would then repost for the guidance role in the spring when we have a higher probability of getting a viable candidate. The reasoning for this is that it'll allow us to have Mr. Lyons, our current phys ed wellness teacher, teach the wellness curriculum whilst also having enough class sections for specialist groups to remain in small enough sections that their classes are meaningful. We looked at all options and we think there is a higher probability of us being able to fill this role under phys ed than we will under trying to hire a counsellor at this point in the school year. There are very few counsellor positions, very few candidates for counsellor positions, and people who are in current positions who may consider this an attractive proposition would not be leaving schools mid-year to take a position. Unfortunately, we're now out of sync with the hiring cycle, and as such, we'll really need to wait until next spring to try and fill this role in the manner in which we had first intended and still do intend. So we think, as I mentioned, that we have better opportunity to hire phys ed teachers. We've been in contact with the universities around students who may be graduating in December. We've talked also around with people who are potentially retired teachers who may be available, and that's why we're coming with this proposition today. I will say to you that it still leaves us obviously a 0.5 guidance counsellor short of what we need and less than what we had last year. And we're certainly working with Ms. Trigiani, who's our counsellor, to ensure that she's getting support she needs and also making sure that the social emotional needs of our students are being met. So it's been quite a lot of brainstorming, but this is what we think will be our best proposition. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions or any clarity on that.
Questions for Will? It was ironic that you couldn't hear me. So was this, and I might be recollecting incorrectly, but was this position originally a PE position last year and then we switched it to the counselor position?
So sort of. What we had done, initially I'd come and requested that we would hire a half-time health teacher. One of the challenges with and this is why we then changed it, is that half-time roles, most people who pursue a half-time position do not look to work 5 half days a week. They are looking to work 2.5 days a week and have 2.5 days not in the workplace. When they are as part of a rotation of getting a daily class, then obviously that doesn't work. We'd also seen some challenges with the half-time guidance role because it was a similar situation where a situation may occur on a Thursday afternoon that needs some closure or follow-up the very next day. That would then get passed from one counsellor to the next counsellor because the counsellor who started that work won't be back until the following Monday or Tuesday. And so what we had then said was actually rather than have half-time health, which was going to be hard to fill in that model, if we had full-time position, that solves both these problems in one go. And as I mentioned, we thought we had achieved that. Unfortunately, a candidate we had when we'd hired earlier had then removed themselves pretty late in the summer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
But you think you'll have better luck with the PE teacher even though it's mid-year? Because there's a different kind of pool.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So, for example, Mr. Trigiani also teaches adjunct counselors. She's teaching counselors in an adjunct role. And in her internship class that she's teaching, the students are hired already as on conditional certificates, even though they're not yet got their certification. There's such a shortage for counselors entering the field. Whereas we know there are candidates within phys ed, as I mentioned, we've reached out to universities, not that they're necessarily waiting for this decision. And I will say, as we're all aware, housing within the commuting distance of RSU 5 is also becoming increasingly difficult for beginning teachers to get located close enough by. There's a number of factors, but yes, we feel more confident that we could fill it in this role than we could from a counselor.
Thank you. Any other questions for Will? Do you want to move the vote to now? So that would be great. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So do I have a motion for consideration to employ a PE teacher instead of a guidance counselor at the Durham Community School for the 2023-2024 school year? Candy and Beth, thank you. Any other questions? So this isn't a specific person yet. This is basically just to change what we have for a posting from a counselor to a PE teacher. All right. All those in favor? Unopposed. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Oh, I should have said thank you.
You could leave your glasses for Jen. Yeah. I don't know if there's another sheet. Cynthia would know. Okay. All right. So we will move on to number 9, which is administrator reports. We will continue on with our goal review and update for the upcoming year, and we will start with Freeport Middle School and Ray Grogan. I was teasing Will, but it just as easily could have been your reading glasses.
Well, and when I was first hired here, I did not wear glasses either. So, so Ray Grogan, Freeport Middle School principal. You all have the documents in front of you. The big goal last year for us as a staff was really to improve our mainstream instructions for our ESLO students. And we had a really good year with that. We started, early in the year and put really everything that's in place here with the in-house professional development, the outside professional development coming in and working on each of the stages. But what kind of happened through the year as we brought the kids along, we weren't continuing to work on those skills because they were out of that introductory level. They were out of that next level. They were out of that next level. And there wasn't the next group of kids coming in. So we did it once and then moved on. We did it once and then moved on. So we really never became kind of owners of that skill because we didn't practice it enough with it. And we made great progress through the year. And then toward the end of the year, as a lot of our ESL students moved away, our numbers dropped at the schools, and it really wasn't a priority in late spring or in the summer, when we work with teachers on continuing to build these skills. So then come August, when we got the surprise, we had to really go back and relook at what we had done, what we had in place, bring a lot of that stuff back in for the teachers, and then look at where are the next steps we need to go based on what we did, last year with it. And if I go through last year's goals, and the first one is learn computer-based translation skills for content and communications. A lot of that last year was with the teachers. This year, we've learned it needs to be the teachers and the students. So really working with the students on taking the ownership and that skills come to with that. When we looked last year a lot at work to determine essential skills and learnings at each stage. That was really looking at what skills they have and what they should be learning in each stage. And now we're looking to tie that to, all right, we know this is where they were in the language acquisition. What content standards can we look at to teach to tie that in there as well? So that's kind of the next step that's come with it this year. The outside professional development is something we are looking to continue because we are definitely not the experts in this, and you'll hear me again come budget time, with that's going to be a need for us to continue to grow this. And, when we do look at our data on it, we don't have a ton of data of kids that, tested NWA twice because they either weren't here at the beginning or weren't here at the end. The limited data we have on the WIDA and the NWA is very good, but I will say it is very limited just because of the kids moving in and out. So that really looks at that one goal that's now been stretched into two goals. If you look at the 22-23 and then on the 23-24 page, I really have gone over all that because they are all really connected. We're just kind of taking the next steps to do that. And one of the things we're taking a different mindset with that we really are looking at our school as we are a multilingual school now, and we have to be ready for this all the time. We just had one family move out and another family move in. So, we're starting over, and that's what we, know that we're going to be seeing, and we need to be ready for that, continually moving in and out as they find, permanent housing and, they're replaced in the hotel with another family that wants this more permanent than what they are currently in. So it is a mentality switch for our school that we are a multilingual school that needs to own this over the long term, because I don't see this as, going away, in the spring like it did last year. Any questions on that kind of last year's and this year's goal around the multilingual learners? Okay. And then now go back to
I'm going to ask one question, sorry.
All right, I'm ready.
Just in terms of staffing for, I was just curious where we are, because I know we had added another position and an ed tech. Have we been able to fill those? Are they still?
They are posted and not filled.
Okay, so all the good
We're
work you guys are
hopeful.
already doing is with the staff
we
you already
posted,
have. Yeah.
We're hopeful to, have those positions filled. I think they will. Like some positions we know we probably won't fill this year. I think that the remaining ones we will be able to fill at some point in time with that. But that has been, a huge, concern because we need to get it fully staffed, and we've had to pull ed techs and teachers from different places to, work on the language acquisition skills because, we really need to make sure we have that support. And then if I looked at the improved communication to students and parents at Freeport Middle School, one of the big things in there was really looking at our parent-teacher conference setup with it. I think probably prior to Beth's oldest coming through, when Shannon was the superintendent, we looked at this with all the parents. We surveyed the parents. We surveyed the teachers on how to best do it, because the problem we face at the middle school is our teachers all teach more kids than the K-5 kids. The K-5, they have their classroom. They have 25 kids. Our teachers are all teaching about 100 kids, and at the middle school level, the parents still come in at a very high rate. So just the time slots that's in the teacher's contract for parent-teacher conferences, the model K-5 doesn't work. And, because of that higher participation rate than the high school, it doesn't work either. So we, at that point in time, switched to, when Shannon was the superintendent, we switched to one time in the fall and then as needed in the spring. And, that was through parent surveys with that. And then through COVID and just completely new parent groups, all through and times, we switched up what we were doing to have 3 in the fall and 1 drop-in permanent night in the spring. And we did survey parents and teachers last year to get input when we set it up and after. And that is the model that we heard from parents and teachers, that they want fall and then a 1 drop-in night like the high school had a few years ago here, with that. So that is our model moving forward based on the feedback from parents and teachers. And the other parts of that goal were really to work on making sure we were getting out weekly emails with announcements and information, and making sure that PowerSchool and Google Classrooms were updated regularly for increased communication to the parents and kids. And we feel good about that goal as well. Any questions about that goal from last year?
I'm curious, and I'm sure you guys have discussed why it works differently in the different schools, but so Durham has a completely different parent-teacher conference model than that. Will snuck out before I ask the question.
I think he filled out my survey because one parent said they wanted that.
I mean, I'm not necessarily advocating for it because, I mean, basically how it works in Durham is you have your conference. It's a student-led conference all through middle school, and it's with your student and their advisor. So which is either, depending on which year your kids are in, whether it's the specialists or whether it's the classroom teachers, the 5 classroom teachers. So, I mean, you could have someone who doesn't necessarily have your kid in a classroom as their advisor, but they have feedback from all the teachers.
And I've done that as a teacher, and we did have that model at Freeport Middle School with our advisory teachers leading that, and that was parent feedback that we got rid of that model. It was, in response to the parents that they really, and I don't want the other teachers to take this wrong, but they really wanted to meet with their math and language arts teachers is really the feedback that we got.
I was just curious why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, as we've switched, it's really been due to parent feedback and surveys over the years. And it is a combination of in-person and online, with it some nights are in person, some are online, and that is based on parent feedback and the surveys. And that's what we did last year, and we'll continue that this year, so there'll be both options available in the fall.
So just to clarify, so a parent would come to one night in the fall and they could meet with every teacher.
Every teacher. Yep. So we send out an email that has, it's called Pick a Time, the program that we use, and you would see all of your kids listed. So at 3:30 you might pick the STEM teacher. At 3:40 you might pick the science teacher, and it's the same for the online night as the in-person night.
So it's the same way the high school does it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Carry on.
Okay. And then the other goal is this year is the implementation of responsive classroom in our advisory, and it's really beyond the advisory because it's really a philosophy and an approach that's used in a lot of places. This summer we did have 10 staff that were trained by the responsive classroom program themselves. We hosted that training and had probably 20 people at the training. 10 were Freeport Middle School, some were from surrounding districts as well that came and participated in it. And we're really using the train the trainer model where those staff are trained and then now leading professional development. So at the last PLD day, there was staff leading professional development around responsive classroom. With that, this afternoon's staff meeting, one of the choices teachers had was something that had to do with responsive classroom as well. With that, looking at the other parts is, staff providing materials for implementing it. That has been done completely. With that, they'll probably come back and ask for more, but we will be able to do that for them as well. And then another big part is the time throughout the year to dedicate it. Because I know when I was a teacher, I knew if a principal or a school board or superintendent gave us the time and the money, I knew it was important. If they didn't give you one or the other, it wasn't as important. So this is a priority to us, and we've really dedicated the time, in staff meetings and PLCs and in professional learning days, that there's the time for them to work on their responsive classroom lessons and use their responsive classroom lessons, in their classrooms and in their advisory. And one of the words we use is responsive classroom like. There are a lot of programs out there that are similar and have the same approach, same ideas. That's what we want. We're comfortable with anything that has the right ideas and the right approaches to getting kids interacting positively and things that benefit more a student-centered classroom.
I assume this program is replacing something else. Is that true?
It is.
Can
So
you tell us about the rationale for the switch?
So when we put in our advisory classroom a number of years ago, we went with developmental designs, and at that point in time, responsive classroom only went to 5th grade.
I'm going to ask you just to be a little closer to the mic.
Sorry, we would use developmental designs, because in RC at that point only went to 5th grade. Since then, developmental designs and the responsive classroom have kind of merged, and there's no more developmental designs, and now responsive classroom is up through the 8th grade as well. With that, so that part made it easy, and the kids are coming to us with that language and that approach, from the K through 5. So it makes it easy as well with that. And a lot of the ropes course we have, we do a lot of our training through an organization called High Five, and the language and the approach lines up very well with them as well. So like when I say responsive classroom, like the High Five program that we do with our ropes course, lines up perfectly to that. So we thought it was an easy transition, in especially what K-5 has done and invested in our district.
Is this something that was on the docket to happen before COVID? Because it's unusual for us to have because I know they rolled responsive classroom in the Durham Middle School out in 1920. But it's not uncommon for us to be a year or so off. Like they'll pilot it in one place, and if it goes well, they'll roll it out in other parts of the district. Was this something that was supposed to happen pre-COVID?
We've talked about it. It was actually in the 5-year plan, and we've talked about it with it. And a lot of stuff we were doing was very responsive classroom the things there. But when we did the developmental designs training and that, a lot of that staff, has turned over. We were ready for a refresher, re-energization of it. So it was a good time for us to kind of bring in the formal training and get us all kind of back, because we did a really good job with developmental designs and getting that in, but then we kind of were splintering and going in different ways, and it really helped us refocus and get us all back to kind of the same, because we really want all kids in all advisories to have a similar experience in all classrooms. So this was really a big goal of that, or is a big goal, to have a similar experience no matter which advisory you're placed in.
Other questions for Ray? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. Gave her a few minutes rest, and now we will bring her back up for the Freeport High School update and goal review.
The on-off of the glasses. This is new too, so I'm working on it. I am actually going to pass out a new document that's in green. That's a updated version of my goals, because there was some errors in the data tied to NWEA that I'll explain and go through. So thought it might just be easier if we had new packet.
When Ray was talking about the ropes course, I think it was this. This is what he was talking about.
I was trying to pick a color that you didn't already have. I did not succeed. So I'm going to start. My goal is my goal review from last year, and the goals for this year are really kind of divided into two parts. One is tied to the strategic plan that we have at Freeport High School, and the yearly action plan that we do tied to that strategic plan. And then the other goal is tied to our NWEA data. So I'm going to start with the talking about the strategic plan. So for new board members, just in a nutshell, we started in 2015 creating our own strategic plan at Freeport High School from scratch. And so we did a 5-year plan. We are now into a second plan that we created after we got through the first 5 years. And each year, we also create an action plan that goes with that 5-year plan. So it's basically ensuring that the strategic plan doesn't just become this document that lives somewhere in a Google Drive, that it is an active living document that guides the work that we do at the high school. Our 2 faculty member teams that work on this strategic plan is our academic leadership team, which has 9 faculty members, and both Charlie Mellon, the assistant principal, and I are on that team, and then the department chair team that also has 9 faculty members, and I am a member of that team as well. And so both of those teams come together in the summertime. They have 2 retreat days, 2 full days, where they work to review the action steps from the previous year. We solicit feedback from all of the staff members at our final faculty member about how they think we did on our strategic plan action steps, what we worked on together in departments and faculty meetings and PLC meetings and PLD days, and then what they think we should be focused on for the following year. The leadership team and the department chair teams, Charlie and I, take all that feedback from the staff and then work in the summer to create a new action plan. And so what I did, the strategic plan is divided into 5 categories that we always stick with those 5 categories, and the 5-year plan does not change. We don't touch that in the summer because the goal is to keep that consistent. Only the action plan changes. And then at the start of the school year, the leadership team and the department chair teams present the action plan to the rest of the faculty at the first PLD days, so that everybody in the school knows what the strategic plan is, not just faculty, but staff as well. So what I did was, because this is a lengthy document, the whole strategic plan and the action steps, is that I chose just a few to pull out to reflect on from last year and talk a little bit about our work, and then pulled out a few from this year to talk about how we're moving forward for the action plan for this year. So I'm starting on page 1. The first category that we have in our strategic plan is engaging instruction. And so the work that we have done over the course of quite a few years is the work on our year-long plans. The goal is for every course in every department to have a year-long plan that outlines the standards and the units in a timeline of how that class is going to progress throughout the year. So that's a constant work in progress as teachers teach multiple classes, and so they spend some time collaborating on one year-long plan, and then it might be later in the year that they're continuing to work on another year-long plan. So I think that that is a piece of work that is never done. As we add new classes, those classes have a year-long plan. As something like an AP class changes the curriculum per the College Board, then we adjust our year-long plans as well. Differentiation is the next bullet that was on there. That was a focus last year. We did workshops throughout the year, either at faculty meetings or our PLD days, or also in PLC meetings, with the hopes of reaching a wide range of students that are across the classes and the different needs that they may have. A big piece of focus for us last year, it's tied to our engaging instruction action steps, but also our work in the category of equity, is thinking about equitable grading practices. And last year we started reading some texts as a whole faculty about equitable grading practices, and decided to focus on habits of work. And so we saw the need of seeing some inequities of where things were not consistent or things were not clear. And so our goal was last year to have a new system and a new rubric for habits of work, by June that would be implemented this year. And we were really proud of that work. And that has been implemented. It was done at the end of last year and is implemented this year. So we have shifted to 1 to 4 grading for habits of work. So it's something that the students, especially our 9th graders, are very familiar with. It was on a 0 to 100 scale, which there was different challenges that presented. But it's more about that we have consistent timelines for grading. We have consistent expectations across classes and across departments of how often students should be getting feedback on habits of work. We're also, I know we keep talking about some of the things that we're seeing as holes in student skills, and we're really seeing them struggle with executive functioning and their organization, their task completion. And so feeling like habits of work, focusing on that in each and every class in the whole school is really, our hope is that it's going to make a significant difference and seeing improvements there. Shifting to the next category, which is purposeful assessment. We've been working in all departments on common assessments, common summative assessments. We continue to build our library of those assessments, because then there's so much that we can do with those common assessments and data analysis and more collaboration. And so that's work that will continue, that is continuing this year. The bullet below that is about reflecting on data from at least one common assessment. There's a huge percentage of the school that has gone beyond that in terms of the number of common assessments that they have created. This is definitely still a work in progress, because we have focused much more on the creation than we have of having teachers sit together, score the common assessments, and then look at the data and talk about next steps. Some departments are further ahead than that. And they have been able to do that for some time. Some other classes that are newer, for example, we used to only have one chemistry teacher. And so that chemistry teacher did a great job of collaborating with herself to analyze her data. And then we shifted to having a second teacher teach chemistry. So that's new for them to have common assessments and then look at the data from there. And they've really focused their time on building the common assessments. And I feel like this is a great next step for us. Shifting to equity and inclusion, the action steps for that. We have an equity team. That's another faculty leadership team at the school that has 5 members on that. And I'm a member of that team as well. That team spent time last year reviewing data from the scorecard and from other data sources, looking at places where how we can analyze data and where we are seeing that there's greater need for support for groups of students. Particularly, the data that jumps out is our low socioeconomic students that we have seen low data points for them consistently and are trying to create action steps to address that. That equity team was also looking at policies and procedures all across the school. So an example of that would be they were looking at where are we charging for things, and if we have to charge for things, are we making it really clear how to get a waiver, and that we have funds available for a waiver, which we do. Thank you to the board for that. So an example of that would be the college field trips today. There was a $8 charge because the most popular part of the college field trip, Michelle can attest to this, is eating in the college cafeteria. That is what they care about the most. And so we could, of course, prepare our school lunches. They do not want them. They want the college lunch. And so we just made it really clear of how students could get a waiver so that everybody can experience eating in the cafeteria. We had at the college, we had the waivers available, but found that we weren't advertising it enough, and it wasn't easy enough for parents and students to request that. So those are the things that we'll continue to look at, and the equity team creates their own action steps for where they're focused. Switching to page 2. Another step below this was the board has heard a lot about this, about the curriculum review for the social studies department, pre-K to 12. And so we were really proud of that work. They worked incredibly hard, and I know they presented to the board in the spring. And so it's been exciting to see them collaborate and implement those plans that they worked so hard on last year. And then opportunities for the student leadership. I could stand here and talk all night about the student leadership team's work. I continue to work with that team and partner with Jennifer Chase, who's from the Source School in Cortico and USM, and Maggie Hughes, who's at MIT. And the goal of the student leadership is to increase student voice and take student voice in a meaningful way, use the data in order to create action steps. So this year, the student leadership did not present to the board, as you may have noticed in the spring. It was a busy spring. What they did instead was the 3 subcommittees each found a faculty leadership team at the high school that it made sense for them to present their data to. So the microaggressions group presented to the equity team of faculty members. The mental health group presented to the department chairs and the academic leadership team. And then the group that was focused on AP costs and the AP tests presented to Cynthia Alexander and to the guidance department. And I was present at all of those meetings. And so the goal is to have the student voice come into policy and decision making and to enhance communication and trust building across the school. And I think I shared in the spring that we got to take a trip to MIT, which was pretty awesome. I did go on that field trip. And then shifting to community connections, we continue to just try in every way we can to get our students into the community, increasing internships, increasing guest speakers. One of the things that I have really encouraged the teachers to think about again this year is how do we take advantage of the virtual world? There's so many ways that we can have a guest speaker come easily into a classroom if we capitalize on using Zoom and Google Meets and things like that. And so that will be continued work. The bullet below that, where it says the in-school senior project and senior seminar. This was something that was exciting for us to do. We wanted something meaningful for the students who were not participating in senior projects, who decided not to do that and stay at school. And so there were 4 teachers who worked together and created May Term from scratch. It was a little bit of flying the plane and building it at the same time, but we implemented it. There is a lot for us to reflect on and potentially revise, but these teachers took a lot of pride in the work. They built great relationships in the last month of school with some seniors, and they may have had or not have had these seniors ever before, and they just had them in the last month. And it was a combination of academics and community involvement and community service, and really trying to have them have a meaningful last few weeks. And so that will continue this year. So all seniors will either participate in May Term or they'll participate in a senior project. And then the middle ground is that some students had already established an internship and they continued with that internship. And then lastly, for support for students and growth, or excuse me, support for learning and growth. I've spoken before about the targeted student support meetings. Those are our RTI intervention meetings that we host once a month. And so teachers are the ones who nominate students that they're worried about. And then we pull together a meeting of all of the teachers for that particular student. And it's facilitated by one of our SAT, that's another leadership team. The SAT team members facilitate those small group discussions about the students. We do 1 month is an initial meeting and the second month is a follow-up meeting. We met about 48 students in total last year. 77% of those 48 students that we focused on had at least one grade that improved. 50% of those 48 students improved in 2 or more classes after these TSS meetings, and over 60% of those 48 students had better attendance in semester 2 than they did in semester 1. So we're feeling proud of that work. The goal of that is to try to put interventions in place before we decide that a student needs to go to the SAT team and potentially have some testing or evaluation done for any learning gaps. And then our faculty and PLC meetings last year, we spent a lot of time focused on student connection and student mental health, and talked about small and large ways that we could connect with students. And I shared with the board that in the fall that we were asking students about if they could name if they had one trusted adult in the building. That is the goal for 100% of kids to be able to say that. We did that with our freshmen today. It's early to do it, and we acknowledge that with them, but say that in the first 6 weeks of school, we're hoping that the vast majority of the freshmen can already identify at least one trusted adult that they have in the building. And then we continue with our Lynn Lyons work for the last bullet, talking about supporting students with anxiety. We continue to see students who are battling anxiety and trying to help them be able to find tools to manage that. And obviously there's different levels of that, and making sure that we're connecting them with services both inside and outside of school. We have our 2 social workers. We are, in positive news, seeing more openings for counselors opening up, that it's not quite, it's still challenging, but not as hard as it was just coming out of the pandemic for parents to be able to access outside counselors, which is great news. So shifting to our action steps for this year, again, I didn't share the whole action plan because I know that it's a big document, but if you shift to page 4 in the packet, what I've done is selected one action step to focus on for each of these categories. So the first one, for engaging instruction, we are continuing. We know that there's a lot to learn about equitable grading practices, looking at grading with a lens of equity. And so what we've decided to focus on this year is 2 topics. Talking about reassessment. We have a current reassessment policy here that students are able to earn the opportunity to reassess on a summative assessment. There are some things that are working very well about that system, and some that we might consider revamping or revising and thinking about it through a lens of equity. And same with the numeric grade scale, and thinking about how our numeric grade scale supports our students. In purposeful assessment, we're going to continue with the common assessment work that was that's been a huge piece of what people worked on over the summer and in the first PLD days that we've had throughout the year. And some teachers have made incredible progress on the amount of common assessments that they're creating and the quality of those, which is great. The equity team underneath equity and inclusion, they will continue their work of reviewing policies and procedures and thinking about where we have gaps in support for students. And they are also working with the student leadership team, the students who are part of the microaggressions group last year, to think about how we are building understanding with students and with staff about what microaggressions or aggressions are, and how we combat those at school. For community connections, the May term will continue. So lots of reflection and potential revision there, but excited to offer that to our seniors again in May. And then the last one, support for learning and growth. As I mentioned in the update, the JED Foundation will provide us, we are going to have strategic plan part 2. So we'll have a mental health strategic plan that will come from them with very clear action steps. So we're looking forward to the work with them on that. So I'll take questions on this part before I dive into NWEA, if that sounds good.
Maddie?
Thanks, Jen.
Oh, wait, Maddie said she wasn't talking tonight.
Yeah, I take it back. Sorry. I want to go way back to page 1. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about the habits of work moving to a 0 to 100.
1 to 4.
1 to 4.
1 to 100. Now it's 1 to 4.
Oh, God, good. I was like, wait, what? Okay, great. That answers that. Thank you. Page 2, I just wanted a couple things. I just had a couple thank yous. I really want to thank you for continuing to focus on student voice. I know we didn't talk about it a lot in the last year, but I'm thrilled that the focus is still there, and I love hearing the specificity with which that's happening in all these different areas. I think that's super great. I also wanted to comment after Dana's presentation on Valo. It couldn't be a meeting with you and me here without me bringing up Challenge Day. So one last hurrah. But I mean, the reason I love that so much is I have a background in small group facilitation, and I know how healing and culture building that can be. And that's one of the things about that Challenge Day that I really loved, plus the aspect of bringing in people from the communities. I personally love being a part of that as well. So I think that you bringing in Valo to do this work is filling that needs. And I'm thrilled to see that. And it's so simple, just to have the time and the space to ask somebody how they're really doing, and to hear it is just, it's huge. So I'm thrilled about that. I wanted to say thank you for that. And then about community, hold on, did I have two more? Yeah. I have a question about the community members. Are there other ways to engage community members, maybe through the mentoring programs, or because I know we always hear in like Meeting House Arts and other community groups, we have community members who want to be engaged with our students. Are there other ways for us to make that happen?
I think that's a great question. There's always ways to make that happen. We've done more partnership with Meeting House Arts. They've reached out to us a lot. I think we have struggled in the last few years to have adult mentors to be able to recruit them. So this could be my public plea for people who are interested in mentoring. That would be something that we would love to see more students be able to access. I was talking to a parent the other day about we don't have that many adult mentors, and there definitely is a power to having someone who is completely outside of the school, who has some training that we provide to be a mentor and support students. But because it's a small number, we really focus on the students who tend to be most at risk. And this parent was asking about, we have a lot of kids who could benefit from a mentor, which I totally agree with. And not necessarily at-risk students. And so I think it would be great, and especially in that role, to have more people in mentorship roles.
I promise I didn't set that up just to give you that, but it's not a bad idea. So we should do that every year. And then I wanted to ask you about the numerical scale. If you could elaborate a little bit more on the numeric grading scale and opportunities for a more equitable lens.
So it's really looking at, for those of you who've been on the board for a long time, know that when I started here, we shifted to a 1-to-4 grading system at the high school, which was not supported by the community. We lasted 1 year with that system. There's a lot of, so we use standard. We are not a standards-based school. A standards-based school is what uses the rubrics-based and uses the 1-to-4, and that's the only grading that they get. And it's much more descriptive feedback than a 0 to 100 scale tends to be. But we are a standards reference school, so we are using rubrics, and then we're converting things into a 0 to 100. And there are challenges with that. There's mathematical challenges to that. It's looking at things. Just in my own experience, this is the only high school I've ever worked at where a 69 is failing. In all of my other schools, a 59 is failing. And so it's looking at that and saying that we are competing with schools. So our D- is a C- at another school. And what's the impact of that? And so the start of this, both for reassessment and for the grading scale, is doing reading and learning and talking and looking at what's working and not working. Last year with Habits of Work, we were very clear, we need a new system. This is not working. And so right now it's more about reflecting on our own practices, and some reassessment came about in the land of standards. And so I think it's definitely time for us to look at what's working and what's not working, including that numeric scale. What's the impact of zeros? That is a hot topic in education. It's a hot topic in our school, of what does that do with the math? So all of these, another thing that you bring up is that this is hard to forget when you hear this, is that in a 0 to 100 scale, there are 30 points where a student can pass and 70 where they can fail. And so because it's 0 to 69, all that whole range is failing. And so mathematically, when you look at that, that's where people are questioning that. And so, and it's been that way for a long, long time. And so we don't have clear action steps of what will come from this, except that it's important for us to look at how does that impact kids, and especially transcript when this is the end of the road, and what does that mean for them in grading practices? If one teacher's using a 0 and another teacher doesn't give zeros and puts in a missing instead. So all of those conversations, are going to be part of this. We are not looking to shift to a 1 to 4 scale, though. I'll say that I can say it again.
That was going to be my question. I saw that on there.
We
I
are
was like,
not.
Oh, no.
We are not. We are not. 1 to 4 for habits of work makes a lot more sense because we're giving holistic feedback on habits over time.
And the staff is engaged in this. When you say we're looking at this is engaging a lot of your staff in this work?
The whole staff.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Great.
So we just started. Half the staff was here on Friday for a PLD. The other half was out at workshops, that PD opportunities that were outside of the building. And so at the November PLD, then they'll swap. So then the other half of the staff will have this conversation. So we read Grading for Equity is the text that we use, and then we're also using additional texts to go along with that.
I just, for my fellow board members who haven't been here as long, I say fantastic because that was a big, when we had this big discussion however many years ago, it was not just community and parents who had a lot of feedback about the grading scale, but also there was not widespread agreement. So I'm thrilled that you're taking this equity approach to the work, and hopefully you'll have a lot more buy-in for whatever changes are made.
Thanks.
I just had a question about with the habits of work change, because that has typically been the guideline for extracurricular eligibility. And I've had a couple parents ask me, so I don't know if it's been really clearly communicated. Maybe it was buried in an email somewhere, but I'm not sure. So if you could maybe tell us where to find that or how it's been communicated.
Sure. I communicated that over the summer and then again in the at the start of the year, so that because one of the things that kids are definitely aware of is now habits of work is tied to open campus. So that caught their attention. And the score that they need for open campus is higher than for co-curricular activities. They need a 2.0 to participate in co-curricular. They need a 2.5 to be able to leave for open campus, because the idea is you should be here for a study hall if your habits are not up to par, because study hall is when you use open campus. So so that's also in our student handbook, and then there was a document that I sent out, but I'm happy to send it out again so that everybody can access it.
That's great. I just thank you very much. I had some questions, so I just wanted to have that said. Thank you.
And I think it's also for the extracurricular eligibility, when you register them, you go through that whole handbook, and there was a read, agree section in there too. But arguably it was before they started, so they might not have quite understood the change from previous years to this year too. Anytime there's a change.
Yeah, and for the students, we had a class assembly, so they I'm not sure how closely they listen to me, but parts of it they do. The fun parts, they like we actually karaoke, so they like that part. But so we did explain it to them in that, because one of the concerns was that they had very few habits of work grades. We have timing when all teachers are entering habits of work grades. It's every 2 weeks on the same day now. And they had very few before the first eligibility check. So we were trying to warn them about how important habits of work was right from the start of the year. Some kids heard us, some struggled with that.
So can we assume if we haven't heard anything, everybody?
All set.
Okay, good. All right. Danielle.
I just have a question about how then the habits of work scores will relate to someone who gets on the honor roll, right? Because there's essentially 2 honor rolls in the high school. So there's the standard grades and then the habits of work. How will the 1 through 4 put the kids on honor roll?
So the leadership team hasn't decided that yet, but we'll probably look back to what we did before. We call it habits of work recognition. And so I believe that what we did, I actually don't want to misquote it. So we would look back to 2015 because we used to have that policy in place. And so we don't submit that until the end of January. So the leadership team will work on what that actual number is, if it's a 3.5 or a 3.75, or some kids will have a 4.0 for habits of work, which would be wonderful.
Solid habits. Other questions for Jen before you hop back to Colin?
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for this, Jen. I had a question. Well, first, that's really wonderful that the students did those presentations to the three different entities. I was just wondering if there's any way for the board to get sort of some high level, not now, but at some point get some high level details around those. I think on each of them, the microaggressions, the mental health, and the AP fees, I think that information would be really helpful to us.
Absolutely. So I can share the action steps that they had, and the things that what they're doing right now is that, and I promise I won't spend the whole night talking about this, but that, because I'm super proud of this group of students. We have half the team returning and then half the team is new. And so what they'll do right now, they have a really tight weekly schedule. We meet every Friday, and then they have some workshop days throughout the year where it's like an in-school field trip. And so right now they're working on the action steps from the spring, and then they'll host conversations. They'll decide what they want the topics of the conversations to be. They'll do those student-led conversations again, and then they'll take action steps from there. They have it on their calendar to come to the board meeting later in the spring to present whatever they're working on this year. And I can certainly share their action steps from what they're working on right now. I can do it in kind of a bulleted way.
Great. My last question was just around on your the community connections action steps from last year, but also going forward. I guess I'm just curious how does the wider community, I suppose the parent body, but also then just the wider community become aware of those opportunities for community connections, such as the guest speakers or the mentorship opportunities or the showcasing of student work? Is there, kind of how does that happen, and where's that sort of centralized?
So Dee Dee Bennell is our, amazing. Dee Dee Bennell is the outreach coordinator. And so really all of that funnels through her. She has volunteer opportunities and community connections that she sends out to kids in a Google Doc. And then she reaches out to different organizations. Some of the teachers reach out themselves, especially for guest speakers and things like that. But Dee Dee has been incredible in helping us to provide those opportunities and organize those things. She's also, and she's a part of the May term as well.
Just as a follow-up to Colin's question, I'm curious to know if you know anything about how much participation we typically get from the high schoolers when Dee Dee Bennell sends out these volunteer opportunities. Is it a pretty good participation, or lower, something else?
It depends on what the event is. And so, the event that we had at the end of the year that I put in my graduation speech was just outstanding when the seniors had a field day for the kindergartners at Moore Street. Then that was completely volunteer. It was during their senior week. And we had maybe a third of the senior class come, which was just amazing. There's other events that are on the weekends, and so some of them, it's very specific. Like she might say, we've partnered quite a few times with Maine Needs, which is the organization that's in Portland, and Maine Needs can't take a huge group of students at the same time. And so she might say, I need 6 people for this. I need 10 people for this. So it's a good range of who participates, but it really depends on what they're interested in and what the actual event is going to be. Another example would be Furniture Friends. Kids love doing. That's an organization in Portland that helps low-income families furnish their apartments, and our kids go and load the trucks and unload the trucks, and that's one that a huge range of kids participate in, but it's not that many at the same time. It will be 10 go that particular day. So it just depends. Okay. I'm good to move on. Okay. Before I start with talking about the NWEA data, I asked for Cynthia Alexander's help in this because we shifted last year to the main through year assessment, but only for the 10th graders. And so the tests that we gave the 9th graders and the 10th graders for the NWA were two different tests with two different sets of data. And Cynthia is going to share what the implications of that for our goals and data.
So I'm going to try to uncomplicate it, but I'm not sure that I'll succeed in one session. So we are going to have the scorecard presentation that we always do in January. So you'll have another round of that at that time. So there have been a lot of changes in assessment in the last year. I wanted to just kind of give you like a framework to work from for Jen tonight so that you can kind of wrap your head around it. First of all, I think over the last couple of years when I've done the scorecard presentation, I've said a few times, NWEA is the vendor. It's not the name of the assessment. They're the vendor that provides the assessment. So it's helpful for tonight. There's a MAP assessment, and it's called MAP Growth Assessment. That is the one that we had traditionally always given every student, grades 2 through 10, along with what we used to call the MEA. So the MEA was a separate assessment, main state assessment. The MAP assessment, which is the NWEA, is nationally normed. So it's based on students across the country at the same grade levels. Every 3 years, they renorm them and the expectations about where kids should fall. So that's going to be your 9th grade data tonight, okay? So that is the MAP assessment, and Jen's goals have been based, or that you're seeing tonight, were based on the growth data from that MAP assessment. The MAP assessment gave 2 points of data always, and in the scorecard, both parts are in there. There's the achievement data. So what would you expect at the grade level? And then there's growth data. And I'm still talking about just the MAP assessment. There's growth data based on, I come into 7th grade and I score a 200 on the RIT score. I'm expected to grow, don't quote those numbers, I'm expected to grow 8 RIT scores this year, so I should be 208 at the end of the year. That growth data tells whether the students met the expected growth, no matter where they started. They could be a 3rd grade level in the 7th grade. They're expected to grow maybe 10 points. They could be at the 7th grade level in the 7th grade and be expected to grow only 8 points, okay? So they're two separate things. There's achievement, where they're comparing to the grade across national norms, and growth based on where you come in and where you're expected to grow in a year's time. So that's what Jen is going to, the 9th grade is that data, okay? This year, the state of Maine made our assessment. We use the same vendor, NWEA. They changed it to NWEA as the vendor. It's called Maine Through Year. That is based on Maine state standards. So cut scores were developed, and I will say all this again in January, and you'll have slides and all of that. So cut scores were developed, and that's based on achievement, based on grade level. So there's lots of data to sift and sort through. So Jen's quandary tonight is really about, in 10th grade, they use the same format, but what happens with growth, the reason she can't report on growth in an accurate way is because it's not possible. Because in 10th grade, most of them are sort of at the tops or near the tops of their RIT score. However, if they're not, they cannot, the way it was set up as a state is you can only go up or down one grade level because it's an adaptive test. Whereas before, you could go up as high. There's no ceiling. There's now a ceiling. So the percentage of growth in 10th grade, you're not going to see. So I don't want you to panic. Our kids did really well on, the state assessment. But that's why Jen is going, and I'm just framing this up and I'm going to exit right now. That's why Jen, when she shares her data, I just wanted to kind of frame it up so that, and I will help you more later on, so that you understood that there's some differences with 10th grade and 9th grade and why. My little head nods. Is it clear as mud? A little bit.
Did the through-year assessment replace the MEA test?
Yeah. Yes. That is what they don't call it. The MEA. She's saying no, but they don't call it the MEA. But that we're going to be adding a whole new section to the scorecard. You're not going to see the growth for 10th grade when you get the scores this January. You're going to see, Paula and I are working on, we're going to have a whole new section called Main Through Year. So grades 3 through 8 took the Main Through Year. That's our state assessment. And then they do it 1 year in high school, and it's now 10th grade. Prior to this, it used to be 11th grade. They moved it to 10th. So it's going to be a whole new section. And we're going to start with the baseline this year. So the data came in, and I don't think we've sent it to. Has it been sent? You haven't received it? Okay.
I don't think so.
So it will be sent sometime soon. There's individual reports you'll get, and it will tell you the scores are now, the scale scores are 1,400 to 1,600 for every grade level. They used to put a number in front of it. If you were 4th grade, they had a 4 in front of it. 5th grade, it was a 5 for the MEA. So, and then right in the middle, 1,500 is at or above state standards. The cut scores are different for each grade level, and that's a whole other topic. We're not getting into that today. And different for reading and for math. However, 1,500 is at or above across the board. So you will get an individual student report like you have in the past that will come home with a narrative. I can't tell you when that will happen, but it won't be too much longer. You look like you have more of a question in your body language.
So are we still doing the MAP growth assessment too?
Okay, so we're doing MAP growth in grades 2 and 9. 2 to give us, so this year we did because they allowed it and they paid for it. Next year, they're not paying for it. So what I'm going to put in the budget for next year, this is not a budget meeting, but what I'm going to put in the budget is 2 and 9, so they have some data to look at from fall to spring. And for some gate identification, I'm going to add it for 3rd and 5th because those are the 2 places where we use that assessment. We've used that assessment as one data point for identification.
Okay. We can talk about that in the budget because I know historically the NWA was never covered, but we chose to pay to keep them for consistency of data because the state has this tendency to change their test every 3 years.
Exactly. And so they have, so they paid for it last year and we got both. Next year, no. This year right now, no. Only 2nd and 9th grade.
Okay.
Because they didn't, they only paid for it just for those of us who were transitioning. So hopefully that didn't confuse you and it sets the tone.
So we can't call it the NWEAs. That's what I just heard from that.
So I've been trying to do that, but it's so
that's the baseline. We can't call it that anymore because they're both NWEAs.
It's the
we
vendor.
Call them the main through year.
In the
or
measures
the
of academic progress map.
That's the MAP, yes. Okay. Measures of academic progress, growth assessment. That's the official title of that. And there's an achievement and a growth section of that. And so main through year is the more aligned with the MEA with the cut scores and the standards.
The new required test. Because
Correct.
the MAP growth assessment is not required by the state.
It is
we
not.
Just choose to do that.
It is not. Pender tried to use that, and the state pushed back and said it didn't meet the requirements. They got a waiver. They made some changes. They worked with the vendor over the last 3 or 4 years, and now what they've done, it meets the requirements for the federal.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I hope I made it. I think you took my papers, though. Yes.
These are mine. Did I take that one? Sorry.
Okay, so hopefully I can walk you through this. So basically, last year, when I was creating my goals, I was thinking that this was a less of a change, more shifting to a digital version. You may have heard today we gave the PSAT the digital version of that today. There were some bumps. If you want to look at Twitter, I heard there's some great comments. I'm not on social media, so I don't know. But I don't think people were very happy about that today. We had some technical challenges. Our guidance team and our tech team support was absolutely outstanding that we got through the day today. But so they made the point of the PSAT in the same way, is that they didn't just take a test and put it online. They actually changed some portions of the test. And so when I was making my goals last year, I was not aware of how different the data reports and the actual tests would be for the 9th and the 10th graders, because we have used that MAP growth test since I've been here. And so that was a challenge in reporting out some of the data. So if you start on page 3, that our goal last year, we have tended to, what I have done in the past is I reported out on achievement, but the goals that we have set has been on growth. And so hoping that even though our students are kind of reaching the end of this testing line that they had started in 2nd grade, still hoping that they are making incremental growth. One of the things that Cynthia was talking about of both of these tests is when you get to 10th grade, the amount of growth that you make starts to shrink, because there's, especially if you're in that kind of top portion of the percentile, because there's only so much more that you can go. And so our achievement numbers do tend to be much higher. We have a large number of students who are achieving at or above the state level, and then our growth numbers tend to be smaller. So last year, the goal was that for the math test, that 59% of our 9th graders would show growth or meet or exceed their growth target, and 56% of 10th graders. And then for the reading test, the goal was for 50% of 9th graders to meet that goal, and 52% meet or exceed in 52% of the 10th grade. So if you look on page 3 and the column on the right, you'll see first that there's you'll see that there are not the growth scores for the 10th grade. That's what Cynthia was explaining, because that's where my explanation would have been more like apples and oranges. That's what we were looking at, that hard to compare those two. But we do have the data for the 9th grade. That 39% of our students met or exceeded the growth target in math. So we did not meet that goal by 20%. Clearly, that is something that we're continuing to look at. We're expanding the interventions that we have for math. We are seeing more and more struggles in math. Some people have theorized that that was one of those things, that middle and high school math was really challenging for the students who were experiencing being out of school for the pandemic. And that's one of the places where we're seeing larger gaps. But we are certainly trying to increase the interventions that we have in place. We used to have a 45-minute additional math block only for algebra. And so the students who we saw were kind of on that border of, we could have put them in a pre-algebra class, but decided to put them in an Algebra 1 class with some support. That started maybe 5 years ago, I think. Now, starting last year, we expanded that support, that we have it for algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. And so they are with a teacher for half a block in addition to their class, and hoping that that is where they're reteaching skills, working on homework, doing additional practice, and those classes are very small. Those half block classes are usually at about, the largest one is 11 students in that class. The smallest is 4. And so hoping that that helps. We're continuing with collaboration with the math teachers, working on those common assessments, constantly looking at their year-long plans, and looking at the curriculum resources, and doing data analysis of the common assessments that they put into place, to see that we have more students in the 9th grade reaching that growth target. In reading, we had 51% of the 9th grade students met or exceeded their growth target. So that was 1% above the goal that we had set. But the action steps for our ELA department and for supporting kids in literacy are very similar to math, that teachers are working on common assessments, scoring those together. We still have our literacy intervention blocks, which are for 9th and 10th graders. That is, again, same as math, 45 minutes in addition to their ELA class so that they can get support there. We also are fortunate to have the writing center that any student can drop into, but some students are assigned to the writing center if we feel that they need more support as well. So then if you shift...
Can I just ask one quick clarifying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So from the last year's goals, so when it says 9th and 10th, those are the current 10th and 11th?
Current 10th and 11th.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. So if you switch to the last page, page 5. These are the goals for the current year. And what you'll see, the difference with this chart is that on the right-hand side, where it has baseline data, I put the achievement scores, which is not on the previous. That was not a part of my goal. Like I said, I reported those out in past years, but they haven't been a part of the goal. So in talking with the superintendent, talking with Cynthia, thinking about how we can continue to use these two tests and do so in a meaningful way that we can look at how students are progressing. We made the decision to focus on achievement goals for this year and look at the growth there. And so if you look at the 9th grade in math, last year, 74% of our students met or exceeded the achievement target. That's on that MAP growth test. So those are the national norms. And so the goal for this coming year is that we increase that to 77% of our students meeting or exceeding that national test. For reading, if you look over on the right-hand column, last year, 84% of our students met or exceeded the achievement target, and the goal this year, we're bumping that up to 87% of our students that we would like to see that growth. Then to the 10th grade, this is where they will take the main through year assessment. Last year, the achievement for math for the 10th graders was 54.5%, and increasing that for our goal this year to 59% of the students meeting or exceeding their target in math for the 10th graders. And then last year, the achievement was 75.7. Excuse me, that's an error. I'm sorry. That should say reading. And we're increasing that goal to 78% of the students in 10th grade meeting or exceeding the growth target on the main through year test. So our goal is always to look at these data points and both the main through year and the MAP growth test have some very helpful data reports that we can look at. Paula Roberts has done an outstanding job of making them accessible for teachers so that they can find them quickly in PowerSchool. And so teachers spend time in PLCs looking at these and interpreting the data and seeing where students are. Either for the 9th graders, we look nationally at where they stand and what their growth has looked like, or for the 10th graders, then we'll look at the data for the state standards.
And so I know I ask this every time, so sorry. So when it says 9th grade 2022-2023 NWEA math achievement of 74%, that was actually their 8th grade achievement, because it's the same cohort of kids, right? We're not looking for this year's 9th graders to beat last year's 9th graders.
No,
right?
so that's where you can't compare.
Okay,
no.
that's what I
So
thought.
the 2022 data that's on the right-hand column, those are our current 10th graders now, because we won't be able to follow that cohort because it's two different tests. they're going to go from main through year back to map growth, back to main through year. And it is a question, I think, that this comes up, and we started to talk about this but haven't, is it is optional for us for the 9th grade test. We don't in 9th grade have any other state tests that we give. It's the older students who have plenty of tests that they take with PSAT, SAT, and the Science MEA and the AP tests. And so it does give us data points, that's valuable data that we can see, but it's going to be very different in how we've analyzed it in the past, because it's not going to be where we're looking at the 8th grade scores and comparing them to our 9th grade scores. We're going to be looking at those, looking at how students have progressed, say 5th through 8th, and when they're coming to us, and then we can look at 8th and 10th, if that makes sense. They'll be the apples. The 9th graders are the oranges, I think. And so that's a question for us about, do we continue with that test? The only other test that schools around us give is that the College Board has a pre-SAT. It's like the 8-9 SAT. I've never worked in a school that's given that test. Some schools really appreciate that test. Others have found that the data was harder to use because they've never taken it before. So there's nothing to compare it to before that. It's also not timely data. You do not get that data quickly. So
all those pretty cohort charts that we have in our score cards are going away because we're not doing a consistent test year to year. Okay.
They'll look really nice 3 through 8 and then 10. I think that's where you'll be able to track over time. Okay. It will just take us a little time to do that, because our current 10th graders now will have never taken the main through year when they are taking it now.
Yeah.
Forgive me if I'm going through territory we've already addressed, but so I'm going to jump to the 10th grade for a second. So like on the right, we have 10th grade, which is our current 11th grade.
Current 11th grade.
That's the current 11th grade. So that those folks achieved 54.5%. That was what the current 11th graders did. So is the target for our current 10th graders is based on sort of what we saw happen with the last year's class, and so it's based on kind of trying to increase our achievement sort of by grade, but sort of kind of irregardless of who's in it or what their score, anything we know about them from their 9th grade testing.
Right. And so we can look at those individual scores, and there's individual data reports. And so that's what the teachers go down to that level. And so they have these pretty amazing on the website. At least I'm much more familiar with map growth, because that's what I've been working on with the last 8 years, is that these really, and it's gotten better over time, the individual data reports that teachers can access to talk about really specific skills. And it will say, Jen is meeting this, Jen's next thing to work on is this, Jen has exceeded this. So we'll still be able to do that. But when we're looking at grade-wide data, then we're looking at patterns of data more than the cohort of kids that are coming through. And that helps us look at instruction and the curriculum resources that we're using. And if we're seeing gaps in a particular skill, then we would go back to our curriculum and say, where is that? We saw that in science. For those of you on the board a long time ago, we saw that our kids were getting to the Science MEA, and there were sections that we just didn't have in our curriculum. We went back to our 9th grade curriculum and enhanced earth science, because that's a huge part of that and the basis of other science classes. And it just wasn't something we were focused on then. So it's a little different than being able to follow the cohort of kids.
I'm curious what the board's thoughts are around, I would hate for us not to have the data you need to make good, timely decisions, because it's no longer paid for by the state. And I don't know what the cost of it is. I recall it wasn't ridiculously high when we used to have to fund it ourselves so that we could have consistent data. So maybe we could, I don't know what the board's thoughts are on it, but how do folks feel about giving Jean and Cynthia and Jen and the other administrators the ability to, come to us if they want to do, and I don't know, maybe they're happy not having one more test. I don't know. But I don't know. It just feels like a gap.
That's maybe where you don't ask for student voice.
Yeah.
You
Yo,
might
I
not
know
wanna
that
ask
answer.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was sitting here wondering if we should weigh in on that also. And, I'm not a huge fan of testing. I would love to I would love to be a standards-based school, and I would love to give more qualitative and less quantitative feedback. I recognize the importance of the data for the staff. So personally, I'm not a fan of testing that much, but we live in a world that is a testing world, and it doesn't seem to be changing. And so, given that PSATs and SATs are upcoming, it's probably important that these kids have a chance to test and to understand how to take it. Not everybody has the resources to go take those fancy, test prep classes that some kids spend a lot of time and money on. So, I don't know. I think I would probably defer to the expertise of our principals and our administration, and then follow their guidance.
Yeah, I feel like if you're seeing a gap, like there's information you'd want to have if it's not being funded by the state this year, I would say don't let that keep you from reaching out for the resources you need, I guess would be my suggestion. I mean, don't do it just because we like to have our boxes all filled in on our chart. I do like a filled in box, but I'm not going to make kids take tests just for that.
Oh.
Maura.
I'm also wondering how, why they didn't include 2nd and 9th grade in these tests, and if there's a way for us to have that in the main through year test. I don't know. I don't know if you know anything about that, but maybe that's something that we could advocate for.
I think they don't offer the 9th grade. Are you nodding, Cynthia? The question is why we don't have main through year for 9th grade, because it's not available. The test is not available. But I don't know. I don't know why they didn't make the test not available.
So 2 through 8 and 10. It used to be 2 through 8 and 11. So now it's 2 through 8 and 10. Oh, 3 through 8. 3 through 8.
It's federally required for grades 3 through 8 across the country.
Okay.
And 1 year in high school. And we do it in grade 10.
Okay, so that's why the state has made the new test available for those grades and then is paying for it for those grades to meet the federal requirements?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess just to ask, like, were we to not fund it, and were we therefore to remove that? What is what are 3 impacts of that? Like, Maddie was suggesting that partially it has to do with giving the students an opportunity to test before there are other more quote unquote meaningful tests that they are taking. There also seems like there's questions of understanding our overall resource allocation and where we need to be targeting. But yeah, what are the impacts if we don't fund it?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that's one. I think one is this idea of it is still a testing environment. More colleges are shifting to test optional, but not all. And so it gives them an opportunity to practice. We use the data for things like our interventions. So there are very clear scores for, it's only one data point though. We consider other factors when we're looking at intervention classes like the math classes I was talking about or the literacy classes. We also consider it as a data point for the honors classes. But the reality is that some teachers use it much more than others. So when we're looking at a pre-algebra class where that entire class is struggling in math, because that's typically below grade level. The 9th graders should, in theory, be at Algebra 1 if they have progressed along. And so that teacher is looking very closely. It's a small group of students looking at exactly where their skill gaps and strengths are. Whereas the honors ELA 9 teacher will see that those kids are all way far above reading level, and that was part of entering that class, and that's data that they use less because they know that those are kids with strong reading skills. So it depends on the content area and the teacher of how often you're using it. all of the teachers look at it because literacy is everywhere. But some of the content areas like visual and performing arts use it a lot less. So the impact would be different in different grade levels. Could we move forward without it? Of course we could. I think that they would be, other than the seniors, they would be, then we would have 2 classes that don't have any kind of standardized tests or data that we look at. So then everything that they would have for data would be teacher created, where there's subjectivity in that, of course. And then there's challenges. I mean, I think if you ask the teachers, do they love NWEA? It might be like asking the students. But it's one of those things of when they have challenges with it, then they often can see what the benefits are for some of the students, where we really do need to use that data and see, okay, this is a student who has not made growth in the last 3 years. That's a significant concern when they are not moving anywhere and we're moving them forward in their grade levels.
So I heard the SAT is still on paper.
It is.
Yeah, so they didn't have any of those technology issues.
They did not.
Much to my child's dismay.
I think they might have been less patient. I'm not sure. But no, our kids were extremely patient today. So, and they did all test, and they did all eventually get on. But it was a College Board error. I'm supposed to say that. It was a College Board error, not our tech department or our faculty.
Yeah, when I asked him, when he said it was really hard, the SAT was really hard, much harder than it was in the spring. The questions were hard. I was like, maybe it was an adaptive test. It was on paper, Mom. All right, I guess it wasn't adaptive then.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jen. All right. So we don't have committee reports or policy review this evening, so we'll move on to 12, which is unfinished business. So A and B kind of go together. It's the discussion of the Maine School Board Association's 2023 proposed resolutions, as well as just a reminder on the MSMA Fall Conference information. So in your packets, there's the information on the conference. It is the 26th and the 27th of October. Ginny needs to know by Friday of this week if you would like to attend. She currently has Malik, Danielle, Kara, Kelly, Mara, and myself as looking to attend. So if you would like to go and did not just hear your name, let Ginny know by Friday, and she can get everybody registered for that. And these things always come up together because they used to be on the same day. They are no longer on the same day. The resolutions, it's what's it called? The Delegate Assembly, the MSBA, and I'm trying to remember who our delegates are. Is it you, Maura?
It's Danielle, I think, is the delegate, right? No?
We did this last spring.
Oh, it's Colin. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Danielle's like, did I
She's
volunteer for that? Was it 11 o'clock at night?
Like that.
I paid Mara $1,000 to try to.
It's true. I'm the backup. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Sorry to scare you.
She just knew it wasn't her. Right. Well, she's the backup because she has to be there anyway on the board, right? Yeah. So hopefully folks have had an opportunity to look through 12A in your packets, which is the proposed deletions, revisions, and additions. I think similar to our policies, they have a group that looks through every year to see if they need to make any changes, any adjustments. They change some language. Sometimes they completely delete it and replace it with a new one. So I think B is the proposed deletions. And if you look at the date that a lot of these were adopted, it was like in some of them in the 80s, some of them in the 70s. I mean, they have been updated, but so that's just kind of for information purposes, the proposed eliminations. And then C is basically replacements. So they would strike the old resolution and in favor of a new one. And remind me, Mara, did the delegates vote on these individually? Do they vote on them as a slate?
I think all the changes all the proposed revisions to existing resolutions and the deletions as a slate together.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't need to have individual thoughts on each one unless there is, folks have a concern on any of them. Are you on this committee that does this? Yeah, okay. So direct all questions tomorrow.
Yeah, I was on the I was on the resolutions committee this year, and it was an interesting process. And I'm excited to talk to you about one of the resolutions this year that came from some of our discussions. So I'm really happy about that. But I think I remembered I got a question from Danielle, I think was my confusion, about one of the deleted resolutions, and it was related to teacher evaluation. So I'll just share that with all of you too, because I did ask about that. It's the one at the top of the second page. And that was taken out because there is a teacher evaluation process in law now. So it's no longer necessary. So a lot of the ones that were deleted were just things, like you said, Michelle, that were outdated, no longer relevant. And so the committee this year did a lot of cleaning up of the resolutions that wasn't necessarily always done in the past. So that's why you're seeing more of it now. And then in section C, the ones that were revised were often combined, like multiple different resolutions from the past were combined into ones, just like to eliminate duplication.
And then just because we do have some new board members since we went through this process last year, do you want to give just a quick overview of what these resolutions mean and what we use them for?
Yeah, so the organization that the board is a member of, the Maine School Boards Association, which is putting on the fall conference as well, also lobbies in the legislature, and this basically directs the work of their lobbying. The Maine School Superintendents Association has their own lobbyists, I believe, and their own resolutions. So this is a chance for school boards across the state to go to the delegate assembly and vote on what our priorities are for the legislative session. So that then when the lobbyist goes there then on behalf of the MSBA, we know that that person's representing the voice of the majority of school boards in the state when they testify on something before the legislature.
Great. So did anyone have any thoughts, concerns about sections B and C, which were the deletions and then the proposed revisions?
Can I ask a question for Mara that I feel like I should know the answer to? But so you said that the teacher evaluation resolution that has been stricken, that was struck because since 1979, it being resolved by the MSBA to have that become law, it finally in 2022 became law.
I don't know the year, but yes, it's in law that there's now required to be a teacher evaluation system. I'm sure Jean knows way more about that than I do.
But yes. somebody has been, but like the what it says adopted 1979, that means that for quite a long time the MSBA was advocating that this become law, and it didn't for quite a while.
I feel like it was probably in the teens when it finally became law, because that's when we had to go through the whole PEPG, and I'll look to Candy because I know she was on that committee, the PEPG, right? Professional Evaluation Growth, something. Professional Evaluation, Professional Growth. And that was the Marshall rubric, and I think we'll see that in the workplace evaluation references to that, right? Because there was a couple different ones that we could go with. And I feel like that was before 2021, so it's interesting that they've revised it since it was in law, but maybe they realized that they don't need it anymore.
Well, I guess just to continue that, so for the proposed revision for C to B1G, that seems to be a consolidation of the career and technical education opportunities. That seems to be a consolidation. So is that basically just the MSBA saying we're no longer going to have all these separate resolutions that we're trying to get passed into law? We're just going to have this one chunk of language. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, but I also think that should proposals come up related to these, then this will guide how they respond, it's not necessarily saying these are our advocacy priorities this year.
Because clearly we keep these things on the books for a long time.
Because there's so many of them, and a law related to all of these things, like CTEs. I'm sure actually that comes up pretty often, but a law related to each one of the resolutions, because there's more than what is just here that exist. May not necessarily come up all the time, but when something does come up, this is what would guide the opinion of the lobbyist.
So there's there's kind of like a book somewhere of all these resolutions that have been passed through the years that sometimes they get deleted because they go into laws. Maybe they get deleted because it doesn't make sense anymore. But some of them just stay out there kind of
just
in perpetuity.
Yeah, I can send you that book for some nice light bedtime reading.
And when you're done with that, Colin picked up a book on Robert's Rules. So really put everybody to sleep between the two. Oh, and you even brought it. Okay. Any other questions on B and C? Deletions and revisions? No. Okay. So if we move on to D, which is on the last 2 pages, there's actually not a lot of new proposed ones for this year, which is great. In terms of time and discussion for all these things, both here and at the actual delegate assembly. But I'm gonna flip it to Maura and see what she wants to share on these. Or
yeah, I think they're pretty straightforward this year. Actually, Michelle, I agree. There's not a lot of them, and each of them, the language of each of them seems pretty clear, I think, in its intent. Although I was on the committee, so if you have questions or something is vague, now would be a good time to ask about it. I'm happy to go through them one by one and sort of the rationales. But if there's some language specifically that you would want to see changed or something that's confusing to you, I can try to get clarity, or Colin can try to get clarity.
Yeah, and just I think, and also if I'm remembering this correctly, this is where you all are giving me language that I then get to share with on the super cool Zoom call that Danielle doesn't get to go to. So you're sort of telling me what to do as if I'm recollecting this correctly.
right. So usually what we'll do is for the new proposed ones, we will go through them one by one and say whether we are in support of them or whether we are not. And if we are not, or if we are with changes, then we would give that direction to Colin. And just to be clear, anyone can go to the delegate assembly. Only Colin
Except
can
Danielle.
vote. Danielle is welcome to join on Saturday morning, the something or other of October. I think it's the Saturday before the conference. Yeah. So 21st, something like that. Okay. So nonpartisan school board members. So that's the first one on there. It's interesting that this has never come up before. I mean, it must have come up at some point because it does say in the statute that there's no party designation on the ballot. So my question on this one is this just sort of reinforcing that we want to keep that? Or, Kelly?
Yeah, I was going to say the same. I was sort of wondering how this is intended to guide policy when we already have kind of a statute on the books related to this.
Yeah.
The language that I find the most pertinent, probably because of what we've been hearing recently, is the last sentence about it underscores what we all know to be true because we're board members, which is that we're elected by our communities, but that our constituents are our students. So I think it seems to me that this is to ensure that school board members maintain their awareness of that fact. Because that is Maine law.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the timing's a little difficult because tomorrow the MSBA is actually going to meet to consider whether to adopt a couple of changes from feedback from the regional meetings. And the change so this change may or may not happen would just be striking that out, and then the last sentence basically, adding a last sentence basically that says what you just said, Maddie, that the MSBA supports the position that school board members shall conduct school board business in a nonpartisan manner without favoring or taking direction from a political party. I guess it doesn't have the piece about the students in the community, but.
So there was recommendation that to change it and remove the part that our focus should be on the best interest of the students?
No.
Would you mind reading what the proposed change was?
Sure. So it strikes as the second sentence as determined by.
So basically, it just says the recognizes and supports nonpartisan practice of the election of school board members?
Yes. And then school board members, it strikes part of the second sentence. School board members are elected on a general ballot, and once elected are to focus on what's in the best interest of the school district and all of its students. Sorry, I apologize. That's still in there. But I guess, yes, the without party designation phrase is removed from that sentence, and I'm sorry that I'm making this really confusing. I see that it says "and the school district."
So they strike the reference to the MRSA, the legal.
Yeah, I think they just rephrased it. School board members are elected on a general ballot, and once elected are to focus on what's in the best interest of the school district and all of its students. I think they just flip-flopped that part. And then they add the sentence, MSBA supports the position that school board members shall conduct school board business in a nonpartisan manner without favoring or taking direction from a political party.
So they added a little more teeth to that sentence, but they removed the direct tie to the law.
Yes.
Was there any rationale? Well, maybe you don't know yet because it came from a different region.
Yeah.
No.
I actually feel like it's pretty important to have that reference to the law in there, because then we're not just sort of saying randomly we just do this. You know, we're saying this is why we're doing it, is because it's law. So that would just be my own personal.
Yeah, I would advocate keeping all of the second sentence in there in terms of like content. I don't care how they word it or, the order of it. But I mean, I don't mind the added section where they don't take pressure from political parties. I don't mind that addition. I'm okay with that one. But
Thanks. That's helpful because I can tell them that at the meeting tomorrow.
So I guess just based on how that meeting goes, depending on whether or not how that is altered at the meeting, I would then, if for example the committee that meets tomorrow chooses to take out the reference at the meeting on the Saturday morning meeting, I would then say I want to put it back in. Yeah, true.
I would say so. I mean, does anyone have a concern with the general sentiment of it, that we shouldn't be supportive of it? I prefer this version, or a slightly stronger version than this. But even if they took out the legal reference, I would probably still support the resolution in whole. But Colin's got to work to get him back on his side.
It gives me something to do other than bake cookies.
Just to opine for a second. Yeah, I think it's really important. I think the spirit of this is super important. I think school boards are one of the few places we see in governmental structures where we must work collaboratively and respectfully, regardless of differences or political affiliation. I think it works really well when it works well, and we should strive to maintain that.
Okay, everyone feel good about the first one? So Maura's got her marching orders for tomorrow, and then, so we won't meet again before the actual delegate assembly. So Well, they'll probably send out through the email the updated resolutions in advance, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll be able to see those, and Colin can prepare his words of wisdom if necessary. In advance.
That's what you all really enjoy. There's no room for words of wisdom. You just have to say very directly what you want to add.
Okay, well,
you don't give any rationale or anything.
make it happen, man. All right. That's why we deposed Danielle and threw you in there. She's like, what? The look on your face was fantastic. You're like, wait, what? All right. So parental guardian engagement in the education of their children. So everyone has read this one, I'm guessing. I don't know where this one stemmed from. Which is the one that came from us? Was it this one?
No, the next one. The one about mental and behavioral health.
Oh, the
funding.
last one. Okay.
The last one. Yeah, this one really came out of a lot of advocacy from parents about parental involvement in their kids' education that we're seeing right now. And so the goal was to lay out, all the ways that that parents can be involved and to encourage school districts to do that. So I don't know that this necessarily will inform state law as much as it sort of reinforcing that parents already have all of these rights over or ways to be involved with their child's education that they may not be aware of.
So I guess my question when I read through this is, do we do all of these things? If we're in favor of this one, do we do these things? All of these things?
That was my question too. Does this represent any kind of change?
No, I believe the goal was to capture what is already happening.
Yeah, this would not be a change from what our current practice is here.
The only one that kind of popped up to me is one that I wasn't sure about was all parents. No, it must be on the first page. I swear I saw something about public forums, but I guess maybe this qualifies as that. I don't know. What's that? Oh, it's under rationale. Okay. Gotcha.
I will just add on this one, I think it's also a response to some legislation that would have changed certain rights of parents over the education, or involvement. There was some legislation last session. Maybe, Jean, you might have sent us some updates, but around, I think, greater parental involvement or say over education and giving the school the right to remove books and things like that and have a system for removing books and other things like that. So I think that this is also intends to respond to those those proposed laws.
Okay. So basically saying parents also have the ability to opt their children out of program they do not feel is appropriate. But then the last sentence that says that believes that parental opportunities for involvement in the education of their own children should not inhibit the education of other children.
Right.
So that's kind of maybe the connecting the.
Right. The removal of books, for example. Yeah.
Yep. Anyone have any concerns with this one? Recommended adjustments? Were there any, out of the regional meetings, were there any proposed changes to this one? No. She's thinking something.
Well, the sentence about opting out of programming, well, I'm thinking back to a conversation with Cynthia like 3 years ago. There's programming and there's curriculum. They're two different things, right? So that sentence, that parents may have the ability to opt their children out of programming, does that mean it would be only programming and not curriculum? Because I worry if that distinction is not understood or defined, that we could potentially be allowing for parents to opt their children out of education, which we're legally obligated to provide them. Does that make sense? I'm just wondering about the distinction. Is there a distinction between programming and curriculum?
And this is not curriculum per se, it's programming, or it could be particular, I think there are particular, I'll give an example. Let's say biology, if we were doing a lab that had something to do with dissection, that there would be a way that the parent could opt their student out of this, but we would provide an alternative way to meet that curriculum level. That might be a simplistic example of how that might happen.
But
So
for example, I couldn't opt my children out of algebra. No,
Or
I'm
what
just
about
I'm
health
trying to
class?
choose I couldn't say I don't want my children to take algebra. I just could not do that.
But I mean, I think what the most likely scenario where this comes up is health class, right? Like, that's true. Like, could it be social studies?
Well, they still have to learn the concept, but it might be in a different way. So they're not going to be. They still have to meet the standards. Then, but they're instead of perhaps seeing a
Literature.
video, perhaps they're going to read something instead. So it's the programming they're changing, but not the content of the curriculum.
So because that's vague, it concerns me.
I mean, Maddie, I think I hear you on that. I guess my sense of it is currently that this resolution couldn't alter any law. Right? This resolution can't make a change to on its own. Can't change. This would be sort of would be a recommendation that for something that could be implemented, and it would be at that stage where then there would be, I guess, some sort of differentiation between what is meant by programming and what is meant by curriculum.
But does it open the door?
The way this reads is that they already have this. It's not. It doesn't say parents should have the ability to opt their children out. It says they do. They also have the ability. So I think that's sort of stating an existing fact.
Yeah.
As opposed to encouraging that should be allowed. Does that sound right for? Do parents have the ability to do that now?
They do, or even thinking, classes. I'm going to meet my science credit in high school. I'm not going to take this biology class, but I'm going to take this other class instead. And I think Laura's spot on. There was a lot of legislation last session about books, and also there was some ones about curriculum as well that failed.
Okay, so if the intent is kind of how we're reading it now, that it's just encouraging parental involvement and engagement as partners in the education, which I think we as a board have said and agree with. Do we have any concerns with a yes vote on this resolution? Any clarifying language or questions we want asked?
Would it be worth just clarifying what programming really means?
I guess I'm not sure because they're not recommending anything. It's just the current state. I mean, it's good to know, but I'm not sure they would necessarily have an answer above what Jean and Cynthia know to be true in our district. But I don't know. I'm looking at Colin to say, like, can you think of a question that might help understand that? Or
I mean, I think if it is true that the whole paragraph is saying this is what is currently permitted. This is parents have all of these opportunities currently. Then I guess I don't see anything. I guess I just see us affirming and clarifying, as Mara said, to make sure that parents are aware of that. So I think for that sentence that we have been having questions about, if indeed that means this is what currently exists, and we affirm that it does exist, and we affirm that if parents and guardians want to take advantage of that, they can. I think that's clear. I don't think it's altering anything.
If parents are indeed the target audience for that particular piece of it,
should they know what programming means?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's interesting because as I keep reading it, I feel like the first part of it is saying like what the parents currently have in terms of opportunities and rights and abilities. But the real point of it is the second part, which is saying like these opportunities should be communicated clearly, consistently, in your policies, on your website, through they should be easily accessible. The times to raise questions to personnel about engagement should be offered to all the parents and guardians. It's more like these are the rights and abilities they have now, and the shoulds in this resolution are about making sure everyone understands what those are and how to access them. Maddie.
I wonder if it would be helpful to insert a sentence right after the sentence about programming that simply says, and school districts have an obligation to provide the curriculum to all students. So it's sort of like parents have the opportunity to opt their children out, but schools have the obligation to provide curriculum in some other, by whatever means necessary. So there's you can opt out of programming, but we also will provide curriculum. I think that balances it a little. I don't have the wordsmithing.
I mean, I suppose I think that's a good possibility. I think my question is more. I'm missing the footnotes for all of those initial sentences. Like, where is that? Where is that from? Like, where is that enshrined in law, in either state or federal law? And I think if we knew that, and if we knew like how close that is to the actual state or federal law, then I don't know. I think without, I guess I would. I think that's my fundamental question about it, and I guess I would not want to really add or even subtract anything from this without understanding that better. I'm not sure how we do that given the structure of how this works, because I can't ask that question at the delegate assembly.
Well, I think one thing to clarify is that it also takes into account local control. So in that first paragraph, it talks about federal and state laws, but also school district policies, handbooks and procedures, and other guidance. So I think reaffirming that there are already these opportunities within the existing laws, but then you're right, Colin, it would be good to know what those are. But then at the local level, there may be other things that are dictated by local control by your school or school district. And that should be up to those things should still be up to local control and communicated to parents. And that all of those things working together would be better than, a law trying to dictate a specific curriculum or a specific books not be taught or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it seems like they're encouraging making sure everyone is really well versed and aware of where their opportunities are, And then that last sentence for me is, I think, what's really important, right? Like the choices you make for your child should not inhibit the education of all the other children.
Yeah, and I guess just pragmatically, again, this resolution is not really intended to be viewed by parents, right? It's going to be in that weird book of resolutions that just kicks around somewhere. Like it's not really, like, this language is not intended to be put in front of parents. Like, that's not who its target audience is. Its target audience is the MSBA's advocate who goes to the legislature and talks to them about potential laws being created, right? So I think so I think the shoulds are fine, I think. And I might say we leave it as it is, because I think this is probably one that everybody's going to fight about at the meeting anyway. And though I suppose given that it might be one that because I will say, if you do want to join, Danielle, the meeting is, like, it's very interesting just to see, like, how diverse the delegates are from different parts of the state, and just like the wide array of different viewpoints and perspectives and experiences. So that's just really illuminating and educational. So I guess if this were to be altered in that session by some folks wanting to change it this way or that way, I guess what do you want me to make sure is there, or what can I vote for and what can I not? If that's an okay thing to ask.
I mean, I think that final sentence that Michelle just referenced, it's very important that remain.
So as long as the resolution, by the time it gets voted on, includes that sentence and does not add any additional requirements for things being added beyond these statements of it should be communicated clearly, time should for these engagement opportunities should be offered. As long as those things are not altered, I should vote yes.
I think so. Yeah.
The sentence we were talking about before with regard to opting out of programming, I think if there were additional language that strengthened that, I would not be in favor of that.
I mean, I think if curriculum became part of that sentence, that would be, because that would suggest that we are recommending a change to state law.
Right, because they don't currently have that ability.
Right.
Right, so if it changes, to also have the ability to opt their children out, to should have the ability to opt their children out of curriculum, then yeah, that's probably a non-starter.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys remember, we used to literally just not even vote on these. The person got to the delegate assembly and it was just, good luck. I know, she got us all, yeah. It is fun though. I've never done the Zoom one. I've done it in person.
It's not fun.
It was fun in person because there's some interesting folks that get up and say some interesting things. All right, so that's 2. So yes on 1, yes on 2 with your marching orders. All right, so 3, state funding to support students' mental and behavioral health. See, this one, starts with that they believe, right? That believe additional funding needs to be allocated. I love that this one may have come from us because I anything that changes the EPS formula to strengthen it is great. I love that.
I will say, that was not my idea, but I'm glad that it got added. But the idea that there are wait lists and barriers to access, and so students can't get the services they need to succeed in school, was one that I put forward, and I'm happy that they made it into a resolution.
And including minimum receivers, also a good call. So any thoughts, concerns?
I think of the 3 resolutions we have, this one has the most potential to actually influence legislation. And I like the way that you wrote it in a very specific way in terms of how it can potentially change legislation. So good job, Maura, and I really appreciate your work. And I think it's great.
I also would kind of echo Kelly because I think it's fantastic. We've obviously been talking about this since COVID, if not before then, but that really is what brought it to everybody's attention, I feel like. And so it's really exciting, Maura, that you brought that along and that people agreed. And so, yeah, I 100% support that one.
My concern is they love unfunded mandates, right? Like, yes, you should do more. Good luck. But you never know. Maybe not. But, you know, the answer is always no if you don't ask. So this is a great way to ask. So.
But isn't it they're saying they should provide funds? So they're not saying it's not an unfunded mandate. It's
No,
an unfunded recommendation.
No. These guys aren't about unfunded mandates. The legislature is about unfunded mandates. Where they go, yeah.
If the sentence says the legislature needs to dedicate additional funding.
Yeah, well, they skip that part. And they go, yeah,
Skip that part.
You should provide more services.
That doesn't impact our recommendation.
No, it does not. No, absolutely not. Right.
And is there anything in here that's like if is taken out, I need to vote no? Or I can't really see anything that jumps out at me.
If they added the word doesn't before believes, this whole thing is a no.
10-4.
All right, so in favor of this one? Happy with the way it's written? All right. Well done, Maura. All right. So that was our unfinished business, 12A and B. Reminder to let Ginny know by Friday if you want to go to the conference. And if you would like to join Danielle and Colin on the delegate assembly, I'm sure we can get you the Zoom link. All right, new business. Strategic communications, the workplace satisfaction survey, executive summary.
Okay. Over here. Okay. You'll see, thank you to Ginny for all of this. You'll see some charts at the end. The survey went out in May, and the committee looked at it and worked on it. There are lots and lots of comments to read. But we broke it down into overall strengths and opportunities for growth, basically. And we'll look just here at the district ones, and you'll see you can go through and look at each individual school. We don't necessarily need to look at all those right now. But the overall strengths that were reported were the positive climate, the supports for physical safety of students and staff, and supports for students. And those supports were mainly academic, because it goes on to say that something we can do better at or grow on are the supports for social emotional kinds of stuff. And just to take it out a little more, in the overall strengths, in each school, they report what's the most influential factor on their positive reply to the satisfaction survey, and they included things like school culture, morale, salary benefits, colleagues, leadership. Those were the kinds of things that the schools were reporting that were very influential. Then you go to opportunities for growth, and The first one lit up professional development, and the respondents were talking about wanting to have a voice in planning what was needed for professional development and a choice, and that more often that should be targeted to their role or their goals. Now, sometimes they're very, very broad PD kinds of opportunities, and they don't necessarily apply to what everyone needs. And want valuable topics and content and the use of time. That's all there. And one of the other opportunities for growth was resources. And this was mainly looking at, because teachers are saying they're getting resources, but needing some that are targeted for what they need for curriculum changes or students' needs, that kind of thing. And then another big one was meeting the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of students, inclusive but not limited to special ed students. And then the evaluation system. Teachers, staff were not happy with the Marshall rubric, that it's utilized differently in different schools and at different levels, and that time intensity on some of the evaluations was more than they thought was necessary or appropriate, and that they questioned effectiveness, that in the evaluation they might have said, you need to improve on this, and what happens, kind of thing. If you look at page 5 in your report, you can see which of the following factors most influence your satisfaction in the workplace, and I just would include the top 4 were pretty hefty, and then it drops. So talking about school culture, colleagues, salary, benefits, and leadership had the biggest influence. And then if you look at the last 2 pages, actually just look at the last page. It shows the 6 areas: culture, professional learning, leadership, evaluation, supporting all students, and resources. And I just wanted to point out the last gray line across there. There are some things to point out. That one that's very low is under professional learning, B3. How useful are the professional development opportunities offered to you district-wide? And that was probably the lowest one out of all. And then there are some that were fairly high that I wanted to point out too. In the climate, if you look at A2, another one there, well, rather A1 and A3, I'm sorry. Overall, how positive is the working environment in your school department? That was a positive one, very positive. And A3, would you recommend your school department as a workplace for someone seeking employment? Was also very positive. Then just a couple other very positive ones to point out. Under leadership, C1, how positive is the influence of the school department leaders on the quality of your school department? And then 2 other very positive ones were under supporting all students, E2 and E3. How effective are the structures in your school department that support the academic learning needs of all students? And how effective are the structures in your school department that support physical safety of students and staff? That was also on the very positive side. And that's pretty much it. There was a 51% response from all that was sent out, and it was done in May. And the options were 1 through 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the least. That's pretty much it, unless you have any other questions.
So I have a little bit of a data question, and it was 51 overall, and was that roughly the same for both educators? So based on the different groups that we had delineated, was that
That was total staff members.
Yeah.
In the
right?
district, total district. So I don't have that data.
Okay.
Just a clarifying question. What is Marshall rubric for those of us who are uninitiated?
That is part of our evaluation system, and there are particular elements that the teachers are scored on by our administrative team when they do their evaluation. And it's there are different when the district had to adopt a particular method for an evaluation system. There were certain ones that would be sanctioned by the state. The Marshall rubric is one of them, and I do know that's look at regular. Cynthia has a team that looks at those every year to say, do we need to massage some of those rubrics a little bit so they're clearer? Do they still meet our needs, as well as when we review them as an administrative team too? So there are several elements on that, and I think might even be, is it online, Cynthia, as well? It's on the website if you want to get more details about what each one of those elements are that we're looking for.
So it sounds like you're already looking at this and thinking about how it might be improved in the future.
I think for sure that's done in, yearly in terms of the evaluation tool, and I think in terms of like how do we use this data, how do our principals use it, you'll see some in their school-wide goals. You might find some link to some data they found here, or even with their personal goals when they're working with me. Certainly, we know PD popped out there, so that's certainly, I know for sure, Cynthia and the team will be looking at how do we best meet their needs, because when you look at professional development, sometimes there are district PD that we need to do, school-wide PD, or individual PD. So we'll be looking to see how we can meet the needs of all of those folks. And one thing I'll just say about the percentages for each school. So the question you had in the last survey was folks are asked to complete the survey for each school you work in, because as we know, we have folks that work in multiple schools. This year it said complete the survey where you spend the majority of your time. So we weren't able to figure out for sure whether, for example, if I'm one of the early intervention team folks that responded, which school do we count them at? Because we don't know if that was someone that responded or which school they linked themselves to. So that's why the survey wasn't designed to collect that data. But certainly going forward, I'm sure the strategic communication team, if that's something that the board would like us to collect going forward, we would make sure that we front load that information in the survey question.
Just a sort of question around why, or maybe Candy, do you know why it's 1 to 5 instead of 1 to 4? Is that typical of surveys? Do we do 1 to 5 instead of 1 to 4? Or I just was thinking it would align more with our other things if we had it 1 to 4. I just wondered if there was any reason or.
I was wondering that too.
I mean, I think most surveys are on a 1 to 5, like Likert kind of a scale. Are you thinking 1 to 4, like grading 1 to 4?
Yeah, like the evaluation, like how we self-evaluate and we give ourselves a 1 to 4. But I guess that is different than a survey. So yeah.
But I would advocate for keeping 1 to 5 in this instance, because if you have a question that's not applicable to you, you give it a 3.
Or it looks like maybe a 4 in some cases. You look at some of the groups, you're like, interesting. I was curious if you guys had any more detail or information around some of the resource questions around funding differences among schools. Is that perception? I'm guessing it was said more than once if it made it onto the list. So do we know anything, what folks were, I feel like we've tried to do a pretty fair job of making sure we're consistent across resources between schools. So I don't know, in terms of, being able to react and make sure we don't have a blind spot somewhere.
I
think I'm just trying to remember. I think there were perceptions of different budget allocations given to different schools, specifically around books, related to curriculum. I think the middle school and Durham. That's where I think we saw those comments pop up the most. Jean, I don't know if you remember more detail than that.
And I think some of it's a combination of perception of that, and sometimes there may be more funding going, for example, I think books last year, there was a chunk of money we found because for Pownell, because their library needed to expand. So that might be a perception that Pownell might have received more than, let's say, Mass Landing. So there was some around books for sure, and some just in terms of when the administrators are putting together their own budgets, what their priorities are. And it might be that there's a priority in one area and not in another.
So maybe it's a education or a transparency issue around why some choices were made versus others. Okay. Kelly.
Yeah. I'm also curious to know if someone could clarify the differences or what was meant when it says a strength was support for students, and Candy, you mentioned that was primarily in academic realms versus opportunities for growth or resources. There's a sub-bullet for support for students. Do you kind of clarify what do you think that meant?
Well, the positive had to do with academic supports. And then opportunities for growth had to do with social emotional support.
And if I could jump into, I think another area as well is, if you remember last year, we really struggled with ed techs, for example. Those are people who support students. So that was an area too, that people actually mentioned that in some of their comments.
I just have a general question. I'm curious if the survey is done every year, and if the questions that are asked are pretty consistent. If it is done every year, every couple of years.
Excuse me, it's every other year. And I guess we'd look at the survey to see if we needed to revise it at all, but we pretty much.
And I will add that a big piece that changed this year, it was on the comments section, because the committee wanted to add comments after each one of those big titles, whereas before it was just comments all at the end. So that's why there was a lot more feedback for them to look at.
So so that tells me that people took advantage of those opportunities and wrote more comments. So that's good, because that was your summer reading, right? Kara? No? Okay. Got it.
Yeah, just for newer members, I mean, it's tough because, yeah, you want to be able to have colored boxes so you can see if things are red, yellow, or green. So if you want that kind of data granularity and be able to look at something over time, you would want to ask the same questions. But the problem is, like, the world evolves, and so we're curious about different things. But I do just want to say that I feel that this represents, in the time that I've been on the board, this represents a continuous evolution of curiosity that this board has about how happy our staff are. I wish it was greater than 51%, but as far as surveys go, it's actually pretty darn good. I think it's overall really positive, and it's great to know where we have opportunities for growth. They don't make me go, we have terrible problems, but what it does for me as a board member is this would inform the kinds of questions that I ask every administrator when they come before us and give us sort of the state of the school. You know, how are you focusing on this with your staff? You know, what do you think is perception? What do you think is really a problem? You know, can we address that in the budget somehow? It's a nice thing to look at the top of the year to plan for the rest of the year.
And I guess I just say following up, Maddie should have said it at the beginning, that overall, this was pretty positive response from staff members. And it went to teachers or educators and secretaries and janitors. It went to all staff, which is good too.
Yeah, for me, the one that hopped out for me was that A3, right? So, you know, there's some things that people would like to change, and, you know, how we're using our PD, and, you know, the making sure we have the resources. But for me, at the end of the day, would you recommend this as a good place to work to someone you knew? And, you know, 4 out of 5 is quite good on that, I think. So, you know, I think what that tells me, and I don't know, is that, you know, sometimes PD is not going to be super applicable to you. And if you ask me, I'll tell you, but I understand that's the way of life. And, you know, if we can help to improve those, you know, to make them more useful to folks, great. But, you know, A3 for me is like, how are we doing overall? And I think I'm pleased with that. I mean, obviously room for improvement, because there always is, but I thought this was great. And thank you guys. I know that was a lot of work.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to be careful about appearing as though we don't take that feedback about professional development seriously, though. I think that's a bear. I think that's always a bear, and I think the board can expect it to always be a challenge, but I do think it's something we should continually strive to improve however possible, and provide as much targeted PD as we possibly can. I don't think it's possible to be perfect, but I just want to assure I know our staff watch this, and I want them to know that that's something that the board takes seriously, and we should continue to ask questions about.
Yeah, I'm not implying that there's not work to be done. I mean, I think clearly there needs to be more conversation, because what our administrators think is important is not aligning clearly with what they think is important to their, you know, doing their job to their best ability. So there's clearly more communication to happen there, and, you know, and I'm guessing that how they use this information is to help guide their goal creation for the year. Is that fair to say? Like the administrator.
And they do for individual administrators, but in terms of PD, that's really, that plan is already made for this year, but it will certainly inform PD going forward.
And I'm assuming that we use this information to guide, excuse me, bigger issues like our entire strategic plan when we get around to developing that.
And I think at that point, we'll be getting new data, because this will already be old. I think that we will be collecting at that point when we engage in that process. Then we will be going back out to all these folks again in a different way to gather the data for that.
And do we see a lot of changes in these parameters from year to year or survey to survey, or they stay fairly consistent? Do you know?
I think this is only the second one. Is that fair? So I don't recall what the scores were before. That's a great question. Are we better or worse off than we were 2 years ago? I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, that was 2021. I don't know if we did it in 2021. No, I feel like because of COVID. Yeah. That was a different survey. So maybe we had done one in 2020 before COVID hit. I don't remember. We'd have to look back. It's a good question.
Yeah,
though.
that would be certainly interesting to compare them, especially if you're looking at something that would inform a master plan. Like, are we consistently seeing problems in the same areas, or perceptions at least?
Right.
Yeah.
It was 2019. 2019, yeah.
So it was 4 years ago. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. Okay. Other questions or comments on the executive summary? No? All right, so we already took care of 13B with the vote for the change in the position for Will. We have no personnel, right? No personnel. Yep. Did someone write your name down? Okay. So public public comment. Maddie Vertenten.
Hi, I'm Maddie Vertenten. I'm from Freeport. I want to respond to a comment that was made earlier in this meeting at public comment, referencing one of us who talked about World War II and Nazis, and that would be me. And I want to assure all of you that I did not make those comments lightly. I wrote and rewrote and edited what I said in the meeting because I didn't want to be taken out of context. But this happens in this day and age, and I feel that I was very much taken out of context. So I hope that you all see it differently than the person commenting earlier saw my comments, but I wanted to assure you that the reasons why I referenced that particular point in history was, for one reason, was to explain our assumptions as a policy, the assumptions that we made, and defend why we made those assumptions, and to explain that we did not make assumptions about groups of people. And then I got rather personal when I specifically referenced World War II Germany because of my personal background, feeling that I am the descendant of a group of marginalized people. I do personally apply the lens of being a descendant of marginalized people to my work, and that was me weighing into the discussion personally. In no way did I reference any commenters or any groups of people or what they were proposing we do with our policy. I was simply referring to the work of the policy committee and weighing in with my point of view, our discussion about that policy. I wanted to clarify that and make sure I feel understood by my colleagues, but I wanted to make sure to clarify that for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. All right, so I would take a motion to adjourn. Mara, Malik, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed. Thank you.